crazy time.
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him
Not good. Believe me, not good.
What's up, everybody? Hello, welcome one and all. Keaton Weiss here, along with, all the way from a city whose name I don't trust myself to pronounce right, Russell Dobular.
Namaste.
Namaste. We'll see if any of that Eastern spirituality rubbed off on him. I have a feeling he's the same bastard he was when he left, but time will tell. Why don't you say hello to everybody?
If you ask the poor sons of bitches who have to take this tour with me, they would say definitely.
Yeah, Russell is intentionally ruining the trip of everyone in his tour group, apparently.
Basically, it's like being in the Lost Merchant Ivory film about post-colonial subjects of the empire trying to not feel guilty about traveling to India.
Right.
And I'm the kind of person who just has to keep poking at that elephant.
Exactly.
You know, like I keep pulling a Rodney Dangerfield's slobs versus snobs act on these people, and they just shit themselves every time I do it. Like the guy that they didn't have. I tried to change an order from lasagna to ravioli, and the guy was like, "Oh, we do not have." I was like, "Well, I guess it's my karma." I swear to God, the whole table was like, like who knows what the fuck I said here? What the hell? I just said karma. I'm trying to conform to the local culture.
Trying to speak the language here.
I'm trying to speak the language.
I'm trying to assimilate over here.
I'm assimilating.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's just very, very funny. But yeah, no, I mean it's amazing coming to this country and just it's just not like traveling in the Western world. It's a completely different culture with completely different traditions, and I would imagine in certain like tech hubs, we're looking at old cities and old areas, but where we're going, yeah, man, I mean, there are cows just everywhere walking down the street with stray dogs.
Yeah, we have some video that we're going to play at the end of the show, just a little preview of a little, I guess, cut that you're going to put together when you get back, a longer version of your India trip. But we got some footage that we're going to play in a moment. But we do have some special guests who we are going to introduce right now. They are from the Indie News Network, our friends over at the Indie News Network. We have Mr. Reef Breland over here. Reef, thank you for joining us.
Howdy. Namaste, Russell.
Namaste.
What I tell you, that's good. And
that's one of those things I need to buy before I leave. Gifts.
Tibetan singing bowls.
But apparently, I won't be buying one for you. You already have one.
Yeah,
I got two.
You don't need a souvenir.
I want one of those big ones.
I got something.
They make
for
giant
you.
ones.
Oh, he did get something for me. That's nice.
I got you a present already. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. We also have the head honcho of the Indie News Network, a man who prefers to remain anonymous, old school style, the deep throat of the online left. Indy, what's up, Indy?
Oh God, deep throat style. Jeez, God, I've never been introduced that way. Yes, thank you. It's good to be here. Yeah, Reef definitely has his chill. He needs two of them because he needs to maintain listening and dealing with me all day. So
yes,
Yeah, you guys
That's
are
what's
really
going on.
busy over there. Why don't you talk a little bit about your project? I know you got a Substack, you got a bunch of YouTube shows and podcasts and Rockfins and Rumbles that you produce. Most of our audience knows you guys, but to those who don't, why don't you make yourself acquainted?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I've been aggregating news for about 3 years, and about a year and a half ago, I started contacting some of these independent content creators. Said, let's kind of network up and let's kind of pull resources, and that's what we've been doing. And we produce Tara Reid's podcast now. We got a show for Jesse Jett. I do a show every Sunday night with Reef called How Do We Miss That? And Reef does INN News. They started that. We've done some other shows, some roundtables, and it's just been amazing. It's been putting a family together, and it's getting stronger every day. We got Joe,
awesome.
Shut the Fuck Up Shitlib. Go check out him. Shut the Fuck Up Shitlib 3.
He's back on
Shitlib
Twitter.
3. He is back.
Yeah, I just followed him the other day at his new handle, and so yeah, he is back. He gave me a follow back. That was nice of him.
Nice.
All righty, cool. So we got some topics that we're going to cover this evening. Now that Russell's back, we're going to do more of a regular order show, but we are going to start with some headlines here. Russell, you all right? Tech okay on your end? You're staring at the screen.
Yeah.
puzzled.
Well, yeah, man. For some reason, my ability to disappear a comment is not working. Somebody's trying to sell us like video service. I wanted to pull it down.
Dogehype.com. We get that good Doge money. Elon's in here trying to. What's going on?
I can't see that. The chat's moving very fast. You guys were late coming in here. I'm glad. We always like to get to 100 before we start. I thought we weren't going to make it tonight, but you guys showed up fashionably late. Thank you all for being here. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to this channel if this is your first time here. Even if it's not your first time, please make sure that you hit that like button.
You know what? This is weird because it works for other people. It's almost like they have a hack that we can't block this comment.
I don't know what comment you're talking about. I don't see it.
Very weird. There's somebody like trying to sell it. Hi, I want to offer promotion of your channel. Viewers,
that's a
followers,
Twitch
views,
comment.
chat
That's
back.
probably why. It's not a YouTube comment. It's a Twitch comment. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But none of our YouTubers can see it. Follow us on Twitch if you haven't already. That's my plug for the Twitch channel. All right, let's start with some headlines, shall we? This is a headline that I think is fairly important here. This sort of reaches into one of our segments of the evening, but I think it is worthy of its own piece of attention here, obviously. The U.S. warns of consequences. Antony Blinken warns China against giving Russia lethal support in Ukraine. President Biden has warned China of real consequences if President Xi sends lethal assistance to Russia, according to Secretary Blinken. So,
China.
Look. Yeah, there you go. You got your soundboard working. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, look, at this point, if that happens, I think we have a very clear choice to make. We either sit down and work this out, or millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, if not billions, die. This is not a situation where you can any longer. This is no longer an abstraction at this point. If they start supplying weapons, what that means is you have endless war that can only escalate unless it is worked out. There is no turning back at that point.
Well, not only that, you just had South Africa just conducted joint naval operations with Russia, even though they claim neutrality. And their response was very interesting when the U.S. complained about it. They said, we're going to look into this. We're going to look at what's happening. Okay, this is reminding me, I don't know how many of you have seen the classic, very campy Flash Gordon. This is like the moment where all of Ming's subjects rebel. This is what it feels like to me. Like, you have all of these countries that have not been part of the prosperity of the West, who have hated us with the white hot light of 1,000 burning suns for a very long time, and they smell weakness. And everyone is kind of poking around the edges, trying to figure out if they want to make a move. Clearly, South Africa is considering siding with Russia. And
India too, where you are.
India too. So if they're buying all that cheap oil, and the United States was forced to back off on the issue because they're trying to shift their supply chains away from China and into India. So we're between a rock and a hard place. And it's you can sense that these countries are watching for a tipping point where they can say, get them. And they're all going to unite against us.
Well, and I think, when in regards to the BRICS alliance being a thing now, and, when Africa asks America, how many bases do we have there? We say, I don't know.
Right.
Like, we've covered that before. So it's, you have Zimbabwe is stopping lithium exporting to America as well. And they're they're still allowing China to be grandfathered into this. Like, you are seeing the multipolar shift for sure. And we're not happy about it. Meanwhile, Japan can send, what is it? Is it 500 or 5 million, something like that, of aid to Ukraine now? I think Japan's jumped in on this as well. So, whatever. I mean, I'd like some support here in a few of the places that are equally as third world,
Tommy.
Yeah, I feel you.
Handout. Looking for a handout.
Pretty much. Like clean water and air handouts. That's terrible.
And when is seriously, the United States is really going to start telling China who they should and shouldn't do business with? That's going to cause major issues.
That's going to go well.
Like you said, that's not going to go well for us.
Well, China is very cagey. They're very cagey. They're like, yes, no, we want to see a diplomatic resolution to this problem. And meanwhile, they're going over to Russia and, they're playing a game. They're maintaining these very close relations with Russia, but they are at this moment calculating it's not the time to really make a move yet. It's not to our benefit. But the second they decide that it is to their benefit, and this is the moment, which is, we've talked about this before on the show, that's probably why Russia went into Ukraine at this time. They felt Putin probably felt coming out of COVID, the West will never be weaker. It will never be more vulnerable. If I'm ever going to make this move, I have to make it now.
Well, it was also a few months after, we sort of tempted Ukraine to join NATO, right? I mean, so it also came there. So I think there was also an element of urgency there that you probably felt.
NATO expansion and, we've
been accelerating
the
that
Donbass.
And pushing. Yeah, they started, they escalated their bombing campaign for like 8 days before the 24th over in the Donbass region. Yeah, it's a mess, and all that's just the Russia stuff. But yeah, I mean, look, China's going to do what they're going to do. They're not going to have us tell them what to, who they can and can't work with, do business with, and that's really everybody's going to turn around.
South America and Africa are definitely more willing to talk to them.
Rick's got a lot more people, population.
They sympathize with them to some degree. Like China and Russia both exploited by the West heavily, so.
Well, I think a lot of the world feels that way. That's what Russell was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also remember when China goes and makes an economic deal with your country, they're not all that interested in getting involved in your governance, your government, your institutions.
They just want your resources.
That's it. They just want to make a deal with you.
Yeah, exactly.
They just want the shit. You don't have to deal with everything that comes with cutting a deal.
And their military is not going to show up and make a base there,
Right. So from their point of view, I mean, it's a better deal. And also this is
still
something
exploitation, just not as colonizing.
Sure. It's not as colonizing. It's not as it's not as much of an imposition of power and a cultural point of view on the country, and also something that's absent from the American narrative. Oh, so why does South Africa have such warm feelings about Russia? Why won't they turn their backs on Russia? Because at a time when we were supporting apartheid, the old USSR was vehemently speaking out against it. That's why they are have such close ties to Russia. So
I mean, also they're now kicking Israeli delegations out of unity summits over in South Africa as well. I don't know if you saw that.
All right,
That happened recently as well. The president of South Africa was like, "Yeah, you guys are still supporting apartheid. Like that's what you've been doing." So
all right, let me do a little bit of business here. I missed some of your super chats again last week. I'm sorry. Now that Russell's here, it'll be easier for me to catch them all because when it's just me on the show, I'm the only one who gives a shit about the super chats, right? Why should the guests care if I read a super chat or not? Right? They have no stake in the outcome. But here, maybe we'll hopefully get to all of them. Pickle the Pirate. Thanks for the $2. The U.S. is more afraid of peace proposals than more weapons. Yeah, I think that's pretty well established. And thank you for the donation. Chris Bishop feels like politicians just want World War III at this point. Yeah, I mean, like we were saying, I mean, the thrust of this headline here is if that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what will be. I mean, past that point, like I said, there is no turning back. Devin Doyle, Keaton, it's so nice to see how happy you are now that your old friend Russell is back by your side. Oh, that's heartwarming. Thank you. Your buddy is there for you. I am here for you. Well, thank you, Devin. I appreciate that, and thank you for the donation.
Raindrops keep falling on my head.
Your mother was a hamster. Mm-hmm. Which our last guest, Pat the Burner, caught the Monty Python reference. Russell apparently hasn't yet, but this is from a Monty Python quote here.
And your father smells of elderberries.
Yep, father smelled of elderberries. That was it. Don't ever forget that the people cowering on the floor during January 6th are the ones willing to send your children, not theirs, overseas to fight and die. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Your mother was a hamster. Never thought of it that way.
I fought to go in general direction.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah.
Now
that one we know. All right, so from a very serious headline to a very unserious headline. This is pretty good, though. Some domestic politics here. Comedian / author / former game show host Ben Stein took to the internet to lament a certain label change for a certain food product. He's upset about Aunt Jemima's absence from the Aunt Jemima syrup bottle. Let's see what he has to say.
Which I sometimes do, which is to do something which I sometimes do, which is to make breakfast for dinner. Aunt Jemima yummy pancake syrup. Now, this used to show a large African American, but because of the inherent racism of Americans' corporate culture, they decided to make it a white person or maybe no person at all. But I prefer it when it's a black person showing skill.
Bro.
So God bless you all and have a good evening.
Would you all have a good
Have a good evening.
You ain't black.
Have a good evening.
That's what, dude. That is one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Oh, Ben Stein. Ben
just
Stein
like
is
the old conservative. Figures he'll get in on
old
the
Jew. I'll say it. There's three of us here. The crotchety old Jew.
There's three of us here? Okay, I guess Reef is the odd man out. Yeah.
What?
Oh, another one.
Yes, well, Reef actually, he's like George Santos. He considers himself Jewish because he hangs out with me.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, I got
some of it rubbed off on you. Yeah, no, man. I mean, that's just hanging out at home thinking, hey, you know what? I'll get in on some of this anti-woke stuff. You know, I think I'm missing out on the action. Let's see, what do I got in the cupboard? Oh, here's syrup. Oh, yeah, there's no
I believe it's now the Pearl Milling Company.
It looks like he saved the old bottle. That's how much conviction he has. He saved the old bottle to put new syrup in. Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna have a black lady on my syrup. I'm like tired of this.
That's so funny. I missed the days.
That's
like a blankie.
A lot of times, you know, when they speak on things like this, they try to spin it as an insult to actually the community that has been removed from because and the way their wonderful pancake making skills.
I mean, no one's asking to bring back Bojangles restaurant.
Was canceled, basically, right?
Yes.
Right,
like she was canceled. Yeah.
Well, that is, if you read articles from that point of view, they'll write these long paeans to the woman who was the original Aunt Jemima, who cooked wonderful pancakes and traveled around the country as a spokeswoman. How terrible it is that they've erased her.
They've erased her.
Yeah, the lady exploited by white people for profit. You mean that lady?
I think I actually read that article, Russell. Believe it or not.
It's right after the one where people are upset about M&Ms being sexy. That's where we're at, right?
Yeah, the sexy M&Ms, the deviant M&Ms. What do they have? The gay M&Ms? Something like that.
Yeah,
they had
something like that.
They kind of
Like
introduced a non-binary M&M or something. Or
It's perverted. It's degenerate and
It's like. Now they have like a picture of the factory where I think they made the first batch of it or whatever. I think that's, we actually have the bottle up here because I have kids and we have syrup in the house, and I have no problem with Aunt Jemima not being on the bottle for the record. It's cool.
We're
Who
snobs.
cares?
We use the pure maple
cares?
syrup, real maple syrup, none of the added sugar.
I don't.
I'm more mad there's not a leaf on my bottle of like no maple leaf, nothing.
Well, that's because
I don't even think they get that from real
sugary
trees.
syrup.
It's corn syrup.
It's corn syrup. It's not even maple
corn
syrup
on the label. Yeah.
Exactly.
Have either of you ever heard of the great maple syrup caper? Anyone ever heard of this?
Yes.
It's a very interesting story.
At that time, was more valuable than oil.
Yes, so they had a maple syrup reserve.
Maple syrup heist.
What that means is that it was like a warehouse outside of Ontario, right? And some other people they rented the space because it was like you could still rent space in this warehouse. So they rented the space, stole the maple syrup in their own 50-gallon drums, and replaced it with water that they brought in with those drums into their drums. It's like literally when you steal liquor from your like dad and you got to like put water back in the vodka, you know? Like you got to make sure that line is up to the line, you know?
That's also the plot of Ocean's 14.
Is it? That makes sense. You know, the diabetes edition.
Yeah, right. Zach Boyles, thanks for the 199. Russell, welcome back. Thank you, Zach. We appreciate that. Chairman Meow, thank you for the $10. We appreciate that, Chairman Meow. Colin, you had commented earlier that Sabby Sabs is broadcasting now, so we're competing with her. We don't want to compete with Sabby. Maybe we should, if she's on regularly at this time. Yeah. If she's on regularly at this time, maybe we should switch to Wednesdays. I don't know. Maybe it's hurting both of our audiences. We don't want to do that. We want to play nice, of course.
It's like running
And people can watch replays. They don't need to watch everyone live. They'll be all right.
They need to watch live so they give us the super chats, okay?
Funny enough, they actually, JB and Sabby actually had an episode on RBN today where they were talking about, they had, they're like non-political show, but they were reading Chris Legion's article on his Substack talking about why he left the left. And one of the things they were talking about was people going on at the same time and shows conflicting. And they're like, look, some of us work and like, this is the only time we can. So like we basically do this whenever we can. So that was Sabby's point, was like, do it whenever you can, like by all means.
Speaking of Sabby,
does she normally run at this time? Is this her normal?
Kind of, sort of.
I thought she was on earlier on Thursdays. I don't know.
She started early at 6 because she had Max Blumenthal on today.
Oh, okay. So she ran maybe a little long. Okay. All right. Well, we'll work it out. I don't want to cut into
Speaking of Sabby,
we're not going to read the Bueller thing.
Molasses. The molasses flood of 1919.
Sorry.
Bueller.
Go ahead.
Bueller. Go ahead.
Bueller.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris.
Right.
Oh, another donation here we got coming in. A lot of people. Thank you guys for stepping up. Appreciate that. All the donations help us keep the show going. Absolutely. And they will help us carve out a new time slot if we're competing with Sabby. You think by the time Ukraine's army is destroyed, everyone will have made their money and Morning Joe will quietly pretend nothing ever happened? Feels like the pattern now. Love the show. Well, thank you, Franklin. Look, again, I think the China escalation is very scary. That kicks it into a whole new territory, right? I mean that becomes a situation where, honestly, I don't mean to alarm anyone, but you don't know if you're going to be around for the post game, right? I mean that's how serious that is, and that's why we'll get to this in a few moments. But that's why I don't think you should let Jackson Hinkle's comments one time a few months ago about LGBT issues deter you from attending an anti-war rally. That's just me. But anyway, let's get to our third And final headline before we start our main segment. This is a video that we had some people request we cover tonight. We just talked to this guy, what was it, about, I think it was a week ago tonight. He spoke at the Rage Against War rally. I didn't know he was speaking there. We've interviewed him a couple times now. Our friend Jose Vega. Jose Vega had one of his greatest hits last night where he spoke at a town hall with Mr. Hakeem Jeffries, confronting him about the mysterious, quote unquote, destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. This got pretty loud.
Security Council had a meeting yesterday, and Ray McGovern spoke to it. He is a former member of the CIA, and he testified in support of Seymour Hersh's article on the United States bombing Nord Stream pipeline. If it is proven that the United States bombed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, as has been asserted by Seymour Hersh and his article, will you call for the United States to acknowledge and admit that that was an act of war against Germany and Russia? And I'm asking this because this may be the only way to prevent the rest of us from being killed in a thermonuclear war. And I don't want to be fried. Don't you think the media should be reporting on whether or not this is true? And don't you think you should be inquiring into whether or not this is true?
Hell yeah.
Well, thank you for the question. One, I've got no information to suggest that the United States was involved in bombing the Nord Stream pipeline.
Because you weren't briefed on it.
First of all, I just got to say, what did they jack the furniture from the last Bohemian Grove summit? Like, did they have a U-Haul truck parked outside and schlep that through the woods? What are they sitting on? So weird. I mean, just the optics, like defending a New World Order war on that kind of furniture.
Like literal thrones on top of a stage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
wonderful
they got
optics.
They got this from a production of Macbeth that just closed.
Right, exactly, yeah. Probably in the theater the night before or something like that. Just grabbed it from the wings.
Sir, you got your chance to ask a question.
So you give me an opportunity to respond.
You weren't given information because he explicitly says you weren't briefed on it. Right. Shouldn't you inquire?
So here's what I'll say about, I think, President Biden's leadership generally as it relates to the Ukraine and Russia.
We committed an act of war. What are you doing to respond to that? We have to hold Biden accountable. So listen, you're from Brooklyn, right? You know when to call bullshit when you see it. So do I. This is bullshit right now. And I see what's happening right now. That does not silence me. You can hear me right now. I want you to say something about the bombing because we're all going to die from a nuclear war right now unless you stop it and you at least put and inquire into whether or not it's true. This war in Ukraine is going to leave us all dead. So what are you going to do? Because you need to inquire. I'm a New Yorker too.
Here's what I'll say.
Say it.
We're going to continue to stand with the Ukrainian people.
That's fucking bullshit. Do not do that. You will end us all dead.
In this war against
Vladimir Putin. Peace. We need talks.
Because
why are you sabotaging talks? Do not put your hands on me. We need peace talks. I am not going to take this. We need peace talks.
It's
you are leaving. Listen.
Democracy.
Did you even read the allegations?
Autocracy. It's a
no.
battle between
how about
accountability?
Not airheadedness.
And it's a battle between
how about
and democracy,
how about
truth,
conversations?
And freedom will
not
prevail.
Diplomacy, not destruction. How about that?
Give it any more time, we might have to start announcing this like a Rogan fight.
I don't want to die in a goddamn nuclear war.
I love that. Under that pressure to go into the alphabet bit is great.
Yeah, man, the fucking balls on these kids. Oh my god.
I know Lucy's went with them before to heckle people. Lucy did it in Spanish.
Amen.
Yeah.
Good stuff, bro.
Jose's amazing. Those guys are both amazing. Jose and Kynan are fantastic.
And he did the alphabet thing.
He did the alphabet thing under pressure with the cop dragging him out. He keeps it together and remembers the alphabet thing. Conversation, not cremation. I like that. That was good. No, it's just great, man. I mean, we'll talk about this later because we're going to talk about Rachel Maddow's trashing the Rage Against War rally, but I know the LaRouche guys have a reputation.
Airhead, that was it, yeah.
For being a cult. Well, yeah, the Airhead, yeah. I know they have a reputation for being a cult, There's nothing cultish about those guys. Jose and Kynan, they are two of the clearest, most independent thinkers we've talked to on the show. I mean, certainly a hell of a lot more intelligence than the Democrats, than the Democratic Party, than the MSNBC viewers who took Maddow's critique of the war machine rally seriously. It's just amazing. So yeah, no, those guys are fantastic. That was really, really hugely well done.
And look at that crowd. Look at that crowd.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like you couldn't even hear what Hakeem Jeffries said, but you know it was Hakeem Jeffries' platitudes. We're going to stand with the Ukrainian people and
Well, if you notice, he pivoted from the question about the Nord Stream pipeline, which everybody knows we did it. He says, well, here's what I'll say generally about Biden and Ukraine. He completely ignored the obvious question because, I mean, the level of gaslighting here is just extraordinary. I mean, because what Jose said is absolutely true. It is an act of war against not only Russia, who is our adversary, but our supposed ally, Germany. I mean, there are people who could freeze to death because of that because of that. You know, I mean, that is a murderous act, a heinous act. And it seems like everybody more or less knows that we did it, but nobody says it out loud, and so nobody cares.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, good stuff from him, though. More of that.
Yeah, we've been covering it on how we missed that. We covered the Cy Hirsch article. We actually covered Moon of Alabama, which made a correction that it didn't actually have Alabama. It didn't, a lot of the stuff didn't happen specifically during the Balt Ops exercises. That's where they use that as the excuse to bring in the ship that they were able to then coordinate with the Norwegians over the following 3 months. And they had just gotten that ship out and past Germany 8 days prior to the pipeline going boom. So it wasn't necessarily that they planted the explosives at that point. They actually used that exercise, the entire thing, and they added a special exercise to the end of it in order to be able to use the excuse to bring this warship up there so that they could do explosive training.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Yeah,
so we're gonna start.
I mean, there's no question that we did it, and it's amazing. I mean, it's not amazing. We see this again and again. The way that
the Russians could have just shut off the gas,
buries anything that doesn't fit the narrative.
What Reef said is 100% right.
Yep.
They could have just shut it off. That's what Russell, you said. You said sooner or later. Putin's going to tell Ivan up there to just turn the knob and shut the pipelines off, and that's going to be checkmate. That's, of course, what they could have done if they wanted to cuck Germany. There's no reason for them to pull a Wile E. Coyote on their own pipeline. Absurd, ridiculous.
It doesn't make any sense on the face of it. Yeah, was it you who sent me that tweet where the person was arguing, well, Putin is a psychopath. So
no, that wasn't me. I didn't
doing this. Somebody sent this to me, and it's just, how do you contort your logic to that point? It's just, this is your brain on corporate media.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, they will just lead their consumers around by the nose to come to the preordained conclusion, and if you're really emotionally invested in that, you'll let them.
100%.
It doesn't matter how ridiculous and obviously absurd the explanation is.
Absolutely. Yeah. We want to thank our Patreon supporters for making this show possible. You can support this show by going to patreon.com/DoDissidents. The more patrons we get signed up, the more often we can create this content. It's as simple as that. While that Patreon scroll is happening, we want to do a like check. Occupy Wall Street has mic checks. We have like checks. Hit that like button. Let's get some more people up in here. We're almost at 300 now. That's what we like to see. That's a little more like it. We want to keep the audience growing. If you are here, hit that like button. If you are here for the first or second time and you are not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Very, very important. Free and easy to subscribe. And also, of course, check out our friends from the Indie News Network, IndieLeft.media. They're also on Substack, and they have a bunch of YouTube channels that you should subscribe to as well. So go to their Substack and check it all out.
Indie News Network.
IndieNews.network also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
IndieNews.network. You guys got quite the operation.
This is well, I'm part of a network. I have my own channel of stuff, right? And then we're all part of a network that's like 20 of us. So we gotta hype them up. But thank you.
Of course. No, thank you guys. You guys were, you guys had us on. Reef and Colin had us on about 4 or 5 months ago. It was a lot of fun. So we were eager to return the favor. And it's great to have you guys here. We're going to start our 2 main segments of the evening as soon as this scroll gets done, which it is right now. Shout out to Courtney C., our most recent patron, of course. Thank you so much. All right. So,
super chats.
What's that? Yeah, let's do super chats. Wow, 53 new chat comments that I just missed because I had the patron scroll up. Yeah, let's do those. Russell, do you have them?
I only have the most recent one.
I think I saw.
Which is right there.
Yep. I think we have 2. Let me make sure I catch it. See, that's a good thing about having Russell here. One of the many good things. Praxis, not platitude.
the only good thing.
The only good thing is he keeps the chance. That's why I keep him around.
I had 2 lessons weeks of not getting 10 exhibits 2 hours before the show.
Yeah. Praxis, not platitudes. We did our own ABC version of Hakeem Jeffries. Russell recited that, and we put that out. Nicole, miss you, Russell. Stay safe. That's nice. Well, Russell's staying safe. He's in his hotel room. What time is it over there, Russell, right now? Early morning, right?
Right now, it is 7:12.
All right. It is. He's an early riser. He's having his morning coffee. I'm having my evening coffee. I was tired today for some reason.
It's already tomorrow morning over there. So I hope you guys have fixed climate change. Like, what's going on? Come on.
Well, I think we have someone from even more. We have someone from even further into the future.
Something to say on that, actually.
We have Taya, who's on the line. I believe she's from Australia. She's going to join us for our final segment. But Taya, when you're ready to join, that'll be on our final segment, of course. Just unmute your mic, and I'll admit you. So whenever you want to say hello, feel free. But she, I believe, is from Australia, so she's even further into the future than Russell.
Yeah. Yes, they're 6 hours further ahead from where I am. Or 5.5. There's this weird half-hour thing in India. It's 10.5 hours from the East Coast. It's a 10.5-hour time difference. No, my whole tour group is like a plague ship. And our guide, our tour leader, says that all the other tour leaders have told him because it's unseasonably warm, these viruses that don't normally go around this time of year are spreading through all the tour groups. And they're all getting these weird viruses and illnesses. I'm seeing mosquitoes. And at the beginning of the tour, the guy told me that we shouldn't really see too many of those.
Have you been delirious on malaria pills?
You know what, man? I mean, I have the malaria pills at the beginning of the tour. He was like, "Yeah, you don't really need them. This isn't the time of year." So now I'm getting concerned. Maybe I should go back on the malaria pills. You also told me the snakes are hibernating this time of year. Now I'm like, damn, man. Maybe they're
I'm
not.
sure. I mean, look, I don't mean to make you panic. I'm sure they say that to everybody. There was I went on a snorkeling trip off the coast of Florida once, and they have you go way out into the water, way off the shore. It's kind of scary. I mean, the ocean is not a user-friendly place, right? So on the boat, they have all these pictures because they give you underwater cameras to take photos and shit like that. And Russell, did you put that one up? Did you hit something by accident?
Maybe by accident. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Revolutionary Alliance. Not that we didn't want to read it, but I got thrown off there. Anyway, so they give you underwater cameras and you can take pictures. And there are these photos on the boat of these like 6-foot barracudas, which are predators. Like, they'll eat you. And so I'm looking at them and some people are kind of uneasy about like going way out in the middle of the water and swimming amongst these 6-foot barracudas. So they asked the tour group leader, they say, hey, how do we know the barracudas aren't going to come after us? And he says, don't worry, they'll only attack you if they think you're a fish. And I'm thinking, okay, so how do I make sure I don't look like a fish to a barracuda? Can I put a sign that they can read that says I'm not? Like, that just says to me, don't take it personally if they eat you. They didn't mean anything by it. They just thought you were a fish. Like, it doesn't seem
they can be
very comforting.
Territorial, a little bit. Some of them. But generally, the stuff in the ocean that you can see is what you shouldn't be worried about. It's the stuff you can't see that you should worry about.
On you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Well, you live in
Florida, you're going to step on something. Yeah,
I'll take your advice about that.
Yeah, right. When I was in Costa Rica, they gave Feed the Bull Sharks tour.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, man, I mean,
I've
aren't they
swam
called
with-
bull sharks because they're aggressive? They're like, oh, they get a bad reputation. I was like, yo, man.
Not if they're
I
full.
was reading an article in Australia. They were in 3 feet of water. This girl got ripped apart by 3 bull sharks out of nowhere.
Yeah, they got a bad reputation for a reason.
That's funny.
Yeah.
They say, okay, so what food do we feed them? They say, oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, they're all right.
You don't need
You're
you don't
on-
need to
you're
buy
on the
any
menu.
food. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Devin, does Russell understand George Harrison now? Yeah. Does it give you, any?
Now he'd get canceled for appropriating the sitar.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, you couldn't do tomorrow.
Have you done any mace or gata swinging while you've been there? Indian maces and stuff.
I have not. I mean, I went to see a traditional performance, which was kind of interesting, but not exactly what I wanted to see. It was more traditional dance.
Yeah.
I'd really like to see traditional Indian theater where they use kind of a system of hand gestures called mudras that have symbolic meaning. That would be
Yeah.
very cool to see. But I don't.
Also, the Indian martial arts, it's kind of the birthplace of all martial arts and fitness generally. It's like weight training, stuff like that, all comes from that little area of the world, you know?
Well,
So,
I did get to go to a Bollywood movie last night in a very famous Bollywood movie theater, which
Nice.
was a hoot. It was a hoot. If you've ever seen Bollywood movies, man, they're a lot of fun.
They're excellent.
They're colorful in the musicals. Yes, it is colorful in musicals.
They
I like the
just
guy who can
drop
stop a car with his finger. Like that guy.
Exactly.
That guy's
Like
legit.
the fight
Yeah.
sequences, I mean, they're very influenced by the Beijing opera, where they're just completely, there's a little Jackie Chan element where they're just completely unrealistic and ridiculous, but it functions within its own terms of physics. It's an interesting
They're
style.
good.
Baba Yaga Forest Dweller, thanks for the 99 cents. We appreciate that. All right, let's get to our first main segment of the evening. We've been covering the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment disaster. I think independent media has an obligation to cover this story. It was independent media and social media that forced this into the mainstream. Nobody was covering this on any mainstream outlets until the internet made enough noise about it to get people's eyes on it. So, on President's Day, Joe Biden made a surprise trip to East Palestine, Ohio. Oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry. The note says he went to Kiev to visit Volodymyr Zelensky on President's Day. I'm sorry. I fucked that up.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. My apologies. No, he didn't visit East Palestine, Ohio. He went to Ukraine to celebrate on the front lines of democracy with President Zelensky. And that, of course, rubbed the residents of East Palestine, Ohio, and their mayor, Trent Conway, the wrong way. Here he is on Fox News expressing his disappointment.
Yeah, I think he has to prove himself to you. And Mayor, before we let you go, you saw President Joe Biden over in Ukraine. Did that make you feel slighted in any way? I mean, he hasn't really. Can he not hear me?
I got you, Trent. He asked, before we go, I can repeat. He said, with the president being in Ukraine today, did that surprise you?
Absolutely. That was the biggest slap in the face. That tells you right now he doesn't care about us. So
agreed.
He can send every agency he wants to, but I found that out this morning in one of the briefings that he was in the Ukraine giving millions of dollars away to people over there and not to us. And I'm furious.
On President's Day in our country.
Yeah, President's Day in our country. He's over in Ukraine. So that tells you what kind of guy he is.
And that, of course, left an opening for former President Donald Trump to plan a trip to East Palestine, Ohio. We're going to play a couple of quick clips from that visit, one of him greeting the crowd, and then another truly Trumpian moment at the local McDonald's. But first, here's Trump greeting the adoring fans.
Thank you, sir. Honor to meet you, sir. Mr. Trump, what do you make it about Biden not
He must have brought
showing
10,000
up?
hats to hand out. He's handing out hats.
Thank you so much. Exactly. Your town is Detroit, but here's a hat.
Is he gonna start throwing paper towels?
No, he's got the hat this time.
The real president.
I mean, remember that when he was in Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
Jump shotting paper towels to people.
So there he is there, and then here at the McDonald's, real man of the people moment here. This was fantastic. Let's take a look.
Enjoy your meal, and we're going to get the meals for the fire department. Okay? Hello, everybody. What's your specialty today?
How are you today? Nice to meet you.
Hello, everybody.
I want a Big Mac, extra sauce.
So I know this menu better than you do. Okay?
Oh, man.
We're going to take care of the fire department.
Okay.
We're going to take care of the police department.
We're going to take care of the fire department and the police department. We're going to take care of everybody.
You started the fire.
It's on me.
We're going to grease them.
That's a good one to own, right? Yes, it is. One of the best.
Literally,
We're going to make
grease
sure
them.
they don't shut you down for the multiple health
Plus the
violations.
people that are in here, they're going to get a nice free meal. All right?
There he is. Oh, and the people in there are going to get a nice free meal. So meals on
And
the
he brought
house.
water.
So there he is. He brought water too. He said he brought Trump water, but then he said he didn't have enough Trump water to give to everybody. He says they're going to get Trump water, and then some are going to get the inferior water. He said that to the press conference. I thought that was kind of funny.
Nice.
But
Is
yeah,
he
no,
gonna
look.
start putting Trump steaks there too? Like, what are we?
Don't be so hard on the guy. You know, I thought the joke about
Don't be
I
rude.
thought his line about how I know the menu better than you. I thought that was some rare self-aware humor on his part because he's famous for loving fast food, and so he sort of embraced that. But there you have it. Just an unbelievable unforced error on Biden's part. This is especially shocking because you know that Trump won the presidency the first time by appealing to disaffected Rust Belt voters who felt like the establishment didn't give a shit about them. And 7 years after that, you let him beat you to the punch again. You go off to Ukraine, and he slips in to East Palestine, Ohio, which is, I mean, this is the heart of Trump country. Eastern Ohio, Western PA, that's where he ran up the score, right? And so it's just amazing that he let them, that Joe Biden let him do that again. Just incredible.
Quote, unquote.
Just hand him the opportunity.
Because clearly they're trying to make moves to shore up his popularity, such as it is for re-election. What were they thinking? Who thought it was a good idea for him to go to Ukraine instead of going to this Rust Belt town that has just been devastated by a train accident right after you stopped the rail workers from striking by Fiat, many of whom warned that these trains are so understaffed because of the greed of these corporations that they were an accident waiting to happen. How do you decide, you know, it's a good idea, let me go to Ukraine?
Because their eye is off the ball domestically, okay? Because the Republicans are now in the House and the Senate. Okay, the Biden administration is running scared when it comes to that because all of a sudden investigations are starting to be talked about. How do they not run to East Palestine? Because they don't want the optics and the photos of them standing there at a federal disaster. Now, Trump, it didn't seem to do him it didn't seem to hurt him one bit. But Mayo Pete, did you see?
We're getting to that. Don't worry, we're getting to that.
They knew what it was going to look like sending him there. So they were like, nah. Probably not going to, and Biden too. I mean, he's going to look just as out of touch as Trump did. Trump even looked out of touch. He always kind of, you know, he doesn't really.
I think Trump looked very good there. And look, the benefit of Trump going there for him
very good for Trump.
Is that he doesn't have to do anything. He's not in a position to do anything now. All he has to do is go there and signal that he gives a shit. And it's questionable whether or not he does, because even though I've said this over and over again, because a lot of the libs who are making excuses for Joe Biden say that it was Trump's deregulation that caused this. That's absolutely not true. By the time Obama passed the regulations that he passed, they were watered down to the point where vinyl chloride was not on the list of substances that would have forced, pardon me, this train to get the electronic brakes on it. So I'm not saying Trump made the situation better. Overall,
Buttigieg could expand,
made it a bit worse. But yeah,
could expand
but there's no question he looked good there.
I sent you a video on that.
Yeah, the question is, did he actually pay the bill at McDonald's at the end? My guess is
in private chat.
I wouldn't look for that check. He tends to do that. we're gonna pay for everything. We're gonna pay for everything. Well, no. Then what he does is to the business owner says, "What you're gonna embarrass me by not saying this is his game, man. This is his game. Absolutely. I think he sniffed the guy for the check."
Well, but
Speaking
you
of
know
game,
what? This is what comes up with Trump again and again. He is blessed in his enemies because Trump looks good by comparison. He actually went there. And I got to tell you, as a guy from New York who grew up a few miles from the Trump house in Jamaica Estates, it's amazing to me that this guy who codes for me as being a guy from my neighborhood has this much appeal in those parts of the country because he talks like a guy from the corner bar. Like even in that scene, yeah, we're going to take care of the police department. We're going to take care of the fire department. Don't worry, we got you. Hey, I know this menu better than you guys do. It's like my cousin Vinny, became president. And got
what
really
exactly is a grit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Rust Belt, exactly. Amazing.
Very strange.
All right, we're going to do some super chats, and we have a second part of this segment that we're going to get to in a moment. Robert Templeton, grow, grow, grow. Thanks, Keaton and Russell. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the $10. Don't think I've seen you here before, but welcome, and thank you so much. Cool Blue, 71. Haven't seen you in a while, Cool Blue, but welcome back. Biden did not show in Ohio because it resigned from bellwether to Republican. Had this been PA or Michigan, now top bellwethers, Biden would have showed. The only thing about that is I would say this is right on the Pennsylvania border, and so a lot of Western Pennsylvania towns have been impacted by this. So I think Indy was onto something when he said, like, look, it's just not going to look great because of the fact that he is in a position to do something about it and is not, and also because what Russell said, he did break up the rail strike, and also number 3, let's just not forget, this is Trump country, man. Like, Trump won that town by about 40 points. So, like, he's not popular there. You know what I mean? And so it's not likely that he'd be well received there, right? Let's not act like the people of that town, while they are absolutely deserving of every ounce of support they get, I hope they sue the balls off of Norfolk Southern. Nothing but sympathy for them, nothing but love for them. But they're not Biden's political allies, which is fine with me. I don't really give a shit. But what I'm saying is they probably like giving Trump the win because Trump's their guy. They like Trump and they don't like Biden. There's probably is an element of that. I think we're being a little naive if we don't think so.
And how on earth did Biden decide not to declare it a disaster area? Like, what the hell? He's going into
that was
an election.
ridiculous.
What? Like, that really surprised me.
Did you see Hillary Clinton's tweet
he wants
about?
To win.
Did you see Hillary Clinton's tweet this week on going to Ukraine?
Yeah, she said he's on the front line of democracy. That's why I paraphrased from her when I said that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and also Rail Force One.
Yeah, Rail Force.
Well, we have
the train there. Yeah,
terrible trains here.
Exactly.
Like, what are you?
Yeah, the hashtag Rail Force One. Pretty fucking crazy. Christian Drake, thanks for the $5. It feels like Dems want Trump to win again.
He died.
Here we go. It's way easier to fundraise as you do nothing while pointing and screaming at Donald. Look, this was a big week for Trump between this and his anti-war statement, which we're going to get to a little while later. But yeah, it certainly seems like you're onto something there. Thank you, Christian. All right, are we all caught up on our super chat? Seems like we are. So we just covered, obviously, the sort of presidential political optics of the situation. But I want to now get to another element here. I want to start highlighting, as we've done over the past couple of weeks, some of the people in and around East Palestine, Ohio, because obviously many of the residents there remain skeptical of the various sort of authorities, quote unquote, who insists that despite this horrible accident and dead frogs and dead fish and, you know, lousily colored water, that it's still safe to be there. So here is resident Bob Figley wondering about the future of the town and also expressing some concern that the corporations are going to swoop in and take advantage of this disaster as they've been known to do in the past. Here he is.
All of this uncertainty and all this toxicity and unknown, how do we live here? And if you want to move from here, how do you sell your property? Who's going to buy it? Would it become a ghost town at some point? There's all these questions we ask. Here's my question. Is BlackRock going to come in and buy all this? I mean, we've got a large portion of our asset is in this property and the other. And Austin just bought his house. He just spent his, made his commitment to that, put a lot of money in it, and, he don't know what it's worth. And he hasn't said this, but he loves being here, but he's got a son. He's got a 4-month-old son, and he doesn't want to risk his health or his will or anything else.
Yep. So that's Bob Figley, and then here's Rob McFadden. We've seen him before. He's the guy who showed up with.
Can we get that guy like a painting stream like on PBS? Can we get that guy like? Can he be the next Bob Ross? Can we do that?
He needs an afro.
You're right. Yeah,
he's got everything he needs. He'll be all right. Just whatever he's doing, I'll listen.
Get
to
him
it.
set up with a studio. We'll give him a StreamYard account, and he'll be all right.
Yeah.
Get your number 2 brush out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like ASMR. Yeah, it's
Here's Rob McFadden. Now, Rob McFadden, we've seen him before. He's the guy who showed up with a van full of bottled water, who showed up outside the East Palestine Town Hall, which Norfolk Southern skipped out on. This guy seems to know what's up. Here's him talking about how this is a function of both parties being completely bought by the interests that coax them into soft peddling it with companies like Norfolk Southern.
Want to buy these people's crops around here? Their businesses are ruined. I'm not eating any corn from any of these farms around here. Are you? That woman that's got 3 kids and hasn't worked for 2 weeks and had to pay for a hotel. Don't make her decide if she needs to wash her kids in that poisoned water or not. And that's what's happening. Those are the decisions that are being made. Well, the stock price is being protected instead, not them. Cowards. The politicians and the CEOs of this company, cowards. So long as corporations are allowed to buy the politicians, this isn't going to end. Most important thing's profit. It's not these people.
Good old-fashioned American common sense, people who write these Midwesterners off as dolts and, dumbasses, they're 100% wrong. Russell and I are both New York City tour guides. We meet people from all over the country all the time. That's just that good old-fashioned American common sense at work there. So, these people are not stupid. They know what's up. They know what's going on. And it's a matter of harnessing that energy.
You see a lot of moonshine coming out, though. You can't sell corn. You got to do something with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
well, and that's why the media, in coordination with the Democratic Party, has put so much effort into writing off these people as unreconstituted racists and Neanderthals, because they can't afford to have the voices of disenfranchised working class people platformed. They can't. So because it's what they have to say is such a critique of every choice they and the establishment that they represent have made over the last 40 years. They do not want to allow those voices into the mainstream. And that's really, look, there are a lot of issues you can have with Donald Trump, and I have them, but that is really their issue with Donald Trump. And the proof of that is that they have rehabilitated George W. Bush. If it were really about the history of the person in office, if they really gave a shit about that, George Bush would not be able to show his face in public without being harassed. So the fact that he can go dance on TV with Ellen, but Trump is supposed to be verboten, it tells you that it's not really about anything Trump has actually done in terms of policy. He was a far less destructive president than George Bush was. It's that he, for con man's reasons, I'll grant you, but he has functioned as the biggest megaphone for those people.
Exactly.
They do not want those people to have a voice.
Exactly. They are very, very offended that they have to hear from people like that. And I'm not saying, listen, we don't know the exact politics of those two guys who we just showed. I don't want to like stereotype them and say they're Trump voters. We have no way of knowing that. But it's working class whites from that part of the nation that they just don't want to hear from. It's an annoyance. It is an affront to them that they have to consider what those people think.
Right.
Yep.
Right. This is a very old story in America. Yeah, these poor whites came over as indentured servants. They've always been with us. They went on to become the class of people we call white trash. Later, in some permutations, Jerry Springer people, right? And there's always been this aristocratic class of wealthier, educated whites that hold these people in disdain. This is not a new thing. Those people have now taken over the Democratic Party. And because racism is not fashionable anymore, they've put all of that traditional disdain on this one group while hiding behind the people of color that they claim to care so much about. But if you look at what they actually do in office, they could really care less about them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Tusker's got a question for Russell. Do you still think DeSantis will beat Trump in the primary?
I do. Trump,
thanks,
Trump's
Tusker,
looking.
of course.
Thank you. Trump's looking good out there, but I am still of the conviction that Trump is a great performer. And maybe if this were a Democratic primary with the same dynamics, because the Democratic voters are so mindless, I would favor that person in Democrat form. But because the Republicans are more movement oriented, they're more focused on actually trying to achieve their policy goals. I think that the case for DeSantis versus Trump is very compelling.
You realize we saw this already, right? We saw this already. We saw this in Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio. Like they all went against Trump, and Trump murdered them.
It's a mistake to put DeSantis in that category. Jeb Bush.
No, it's not. I live here. I live here.
Jeb Bush was
I lived through both of them.
I know you live there, but the election is not taking place in Florida. It's taking place nationally, and I'm telling you.
Yes, that's the thing.
And Bush was a clown. I mean, Bush was.
You think Trump wins Florida at least?
You mean against DeSantis in the primary?
Against DeSantis?
Yeah.
No.
I think you're underestimating Trump's ability to perform to his base. You saw it this weekend.
Maybe that's possible, but DeSantis has actually.
He gets to be the anti-war outsider candidate. But you don't you don't see DeSantis calling out the Ukraine war right now.
But that's
you don't see him coming.
No, you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right
you
about
don't see
that.
him going to East Palestine, Ohio either. No, you see him sending immigrants to Texas. You see him sending immigrants to Massachusetts and California, which also, by the way, gets their base.
Which you know why?
happy.
You know what? We're not talking about whether or not you approve of it morally. That was one of the most genius trolls in political history, sending people to Martha's Vineyard. That was fucking politically genius.
It's something Trump would do too. Like,
yeah, I mean,
Trump does theatrics like that equally as well.
Not really. If he doesn't have the focus, he'd forget about it by lunchtime. He'd think about it at breakfast, and then by the time he's eating his cheeseburger,
I feel like the Democrats are going to give too many bullets for Trump to take. Like,
Trump plays the crowd like WWE, man.
Yeah,
he's got that Vince McMahon type of showman in him that I don't know if DeSantis can handle. We'll figure. We'll see.
He does. I just think Republican vote. Yeah, like is he in terms of charisma? Does he have more of the showman going on? Sure, but he's old. Republicans are going to want to take the White House for 2 terms, right? And DeSantis in Florida has actually done the things that Trump has only talked about. Now, you're right. DeSantis is going to have to pivot on his position on war, I think. He's going to have to find some way to articulate an anti-war position, because that's certainly not his history or his background. And I agree that
Get
that's
Moran, yeah, that's going to be hard.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
it is. It is. It is. But I think he has the skills to pull it off. And I also think with the midterm results to point to show that he's a winner, which is what Republicans really care about, and also that he's going to be able to execute ideologically, which they care about even more. And they look at Trump, who's going to be a one-term president at best, who didn't really deliver the first time around. And I think once things get serious, and also Trump does a lot of unforced errors. Like, yeah, he looks good right now. He's going to say 10 things that are going to fuck him between now and the first primaries. So in the end, I'm sticking to my guns. I say DeSantis wins the primaries.
I also
Walls are
think
closing in. That's all I can say. Is the walls are closing in.
I think it depends a lot on factors that are outside of those two specific candidates.
Yeah, there's a
those two
lot of
specific
clown
people.
show coming up.
It also depends on the dynamics, the larger dynamics of the race that are outside DeSantis and outside Trump. So what I mean by that is, yes, of course, Trump is better, especially in the eyes of the Republican base, and in my eyes, frankly, obviously, on the Russia-Ukraine war. We are online all the time, all four of us here. We eat, sleep, and breathe Russia-Ukraine news, right? So we might have the distorted opinion that this is on the top of voters' minds. Where did Russia-Ukraine rank in the midterms? It was nowhere near the top of people's issue sets. So just because Trump is better on that issue doesn't necessarily mean that's going to influence voters. I think ultimately what it's going to come down to is how much mojo the Republican base is feeling. If they're feeling really if they're feeling very, very confident that Biden is super weak and that they're going to win no matter who they nominate, they're going to go with their heart and pick Trump. If they are feeling a little more cautious, a little more uneasy about this, a little more like, hey, you know, Trump could fuck this up just like he fucked up the last one and he fucked up the midterms, then I think they're going to go with Meatball Ron. So I think it depends a lot on that. I don't think this is necessarily going to come down to debates and performance and sort of political
it's marketing,
statecraft, or right. Yeah. I don't think this is necessarily going to come down to chess. I think the race is going to be bigger than either one of them. And those macro factors are going to play a huge part in how it goes. And I think it's anybody's game at this point. I tend to believe, though, that since DeSantis is within striking distance now, he's only down by about 10 points, which is nothing a year out, that he has a very good chance. He has a very good chance. He has to execute, but I think he will. And we will see how that turns out.
They said the same thing on those last primaries.
Yeah,
same thing.
Yeah, but not me. I never underestimated Trump. I was a very early person saying, no, look at this guy. Look at this guy.
I think you
this
overestimate DeSantis.
And the day of the election, when the New York Times was calling it 90% Hillary Clinton, I was calling it a 50-50 race. I never underestimated him. The dynamics are different this time around.
I mean, the Democrats better hope. They better hope for like something. They're gonna have a tough time dealing with either of those guys. So
they have a very
the Democrats are gonna lose to either one of them. Whoever wins the Republican primary is going to be the next president. It's just a question of who it's going to be.
Virtuoso, thank you for the $2. Not for nothing, DeSantis is GOP Amy Klobuchar.
Yes.
I mean, that's what a lot of people say. I think he's a little shrewder than that. But we will see. We're going to have two Floridians on the next show, so we'll ask them all about that. I'll just tease out the next guest. Not that you're not a valid representative of the great Sunshine.
I'm in Trump country, Florida, so there's a bit of a difference.
Where are you? Are you up near?
Right in the taint.
He's out in the slums.
You go right there.
Yeah.
You know?
So the taint is what?
Right under Tallahassee.
That's the asshole, right?
So,
Pensacola would be the asshole, and then the
pretty close. Yeah, like I'm more on
Miami.
Yeah, so I'm like more on the top of the balls, really. If you want to get like,
that's what I figured.
You know,
okay.
There's some stuff there, but like, I'm right under Tallahassee. Go straight
that's
south,
what I
hit
figured.
the Gulf.
Tallahassee. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Where we have all the lovely Congress members' vacation homes is out where I'm at. You know. So,
very often, Republican nominee won New Hampshire primary. True with Reagan, Bush Sr., McCain, Romney, Trump. That's true. New Hampshire is more of a bellwether in the GOP than it is in the Democratic primary. That's interesting. That's interesting.
And
And
then
actually,
Florida would be.
recent polls do have Ron DeSantis up in New Hampshire, oddly enough.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to this video here. This is a throwback to the early days of the Flint water crisis. Here's Governor Mike DeWine and Ohio EPA Director Michael Regan taking some pretty timid sips of this lovely woman's tap water in order to assuage her fears that it might not be safe to drink. This is an old
love the
throwback.
classics.
Playing the hits. Yeah, exactly. Here's Born to Run from Mike DeWine.
This is the stuff. I'm drinking the water.
I'll tell you.
Come on,
we believe
man.
in science, so we don't feel like we're being your guinea pig, but we don't mind proving to you that we believe the water's safe.
We don't feel like we're being your guinea pig, but we don't mind proving to you it's safe. He cheers it.
Thank you.
And then
so much.
tiny little sip.
Ziggy zaggy, ziggy zaggy.
Awesome.
Yeah, they didn't chug that shit.
No, they didn't chug it, and they didn't finish it either. They put it down.
They just wet their palate a little.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it looks like Ricky out Trailer Park Boys just holding the cup the whole show. You know?
At least they didn't split for the bathroom immediately after. That would have looked pretty bad. But, yep,
Yeah.
same old there. Trying to put her mind at ease. All right, now we're going to do the third part in our East Palestine trilogy for the evening. This is by far the best. You guys alluded to this earlier. So Biden blew it by splitting for Ukraine on President's Day. Trump swooped in. He came to town. You have the residents obviously pretty upset about all of this. So then finally, the pressure mounted on Pete Buttigieg to head to East Palestine, Ohio. Here is a Daily Caller reporter named Jenny Tare. I hope I'm saying her name right. She caught up with him on the streets and tried to press him on when he's going to East Palestine. Let's see how he took this.
What do you have to say? Hi, how are you?
Good.
Jenny Tare at the Daily Caller News Foundation. What do you have to say to the folks in Ohio, East Palestine, who are suffering right now?
Well, I'd refer you to about a dozen interviews I've given today, and if you'd like to arrange a conversation, I'm sure reach out to our press office, but I'm not going to have that conversation with you. Just walk
You
down
don't
the
have a
street
message
here.
for them?
I do, and I shared it with the press many times today. I'd refer you to those comments.
Do you mind sharing it with us?
No, I'm going to refer you to the comments that I made to the press because right now I'm taking some personal time and I'm walking down the street.
Are you going down there?
Would you mind?
Are you going down there at all?
Yeah, I am.
When are you going?
I'll share that when I'm ready.
Okay,
Not talking on the
thank you.
street. Can I get a photo?
Yeah.
Then he asked for a photo of her.
Can I get a photo?
Which is
Okay.
really creepy. I mean,
It's
look
a
at the
move.
face on that guy.
He really, more and more when I'm watching him, he really is the character in American Psycho. Like, I want to see Pete Buttigieg start reading, like, the album liners. Yeah.
Right. The Patrick Bateman
Huey
of South Bend.
Lewis's debut album.
I totally would have asked for a selfie. Be like, yeah, here, let's take a selfie. You know, like turn it around on him. Like, you're gonna be creepy. I'm gonna be creepy right back.
He reads as a psychopath. He really does. Like, there's something very just bloodless and weird about him. Like, why
But I'm sorry, that's also
did you ask to take
intimidating
a
to
picture of
ask a journalist to get a pic. Like, you're a government official. Why do you need a picture of this woman? What are you going to do with the picture of the woman?
Don't you understand? The Democrats are the party that represent freedom of the press.
Right.
They're the ones
It's
who
so that
defend
it's so that they
press.
know what you look like later. That's what it is.
I mean,
You
yeah,
know,
it's-
find this lady. That's what it's going to be.
It's creepy. I think it is an act of intimidation. It's like, oh, you're going to chase me down on the street? Here, I'm going to see who you are. You're on my radar now.
It's like they're acting, but they only have to play the role when they're in the room. And it's like, okay, now I'm with my family and I'm on my personal time. So I don't think I need to be the Secretary of Transportation now. Like, come on, Pete. Come on.
Well, at the
That's
time,
ridiculous.
if you noticed, she asked
Rat face is
him
right.
when you have plans to go to South Bend, and he said, I'm going to announce those soon. Turns out he showed up the day after Donald Trump came, fed everyone the McDonald's, and left. Here's my favorite video of the night. I know we have a lot of exhibits, but we're really trying to do this
Chipotle,
story
right?
justice. What's he went to Chipotle.
He went to Chipotle.
We're really trying to do this
Burrito
justice by
bowls
playing
for
this video.
everybody.
Yeah, right. Exactly. One upped him. Exactly. Here is Pete sort of evading the press, and then his press secretary volunteers to take questions, but not on camera. Once again, she's the press secretary. She was willing to talk to people, but not in a way that would make her accountable for anything that she says. This is probably my favorite video of the night, besides the Ben Stein Aunt Jemima thing, obviously. But here's Pete's press secretary dealing with reporters.
Mayor Pete, why did it take you an entire 2.5 weeks to actually get here to respond to East Palestine? Will you apologize to the residents of this city for the slow response? To the government's slow response, do you have any apology?
I'm a press person, I can help you.
Sure. So can we ask why it took him almost 3 weeks to get here?
I'm sorry, I don't want to do this on camera.
What was his personal time off while there was a tragedy happening here?
And can we also ask too why he waited until President Donald Trump came here to actually make an appearance? This is a very important question that people across America would like to know.
I'm happy to have a conversation with you. I do not want to be on camera.
Okay, first of all, what do you mean you don't want to be on camera? You're the press secretary.
Yeah, I'm right.
Yep.
That's your job.
This is your job to answer questions on camera that he doesn't have time or doesn't want to bother to answer. That's literally what your job description is to take questions on camera from the press. And she keeps over and over again, I don't want to be on camera.
Cameras away.
I'm sorry, we're on a public.
Sorry, go ahead.
Does she at least want to be on the record?
No, you'll see. Watch what happens. This is amazing.
This is insane.
This is absolutely amazing.
Look, I mean, it comes from the top. You know, Kamala Harris is another very creepy, weird, off-putting politician, and her staff is notoriously dysfunctional. Her offices, her campaigns are notoriously dysfunctional. Pete, you know, he's a creepy weirdo, so he hires like creepy weirdos. What kind of person takes a press secretary job and goes, no, off the record, record.
It gets worse.
What is wrong with these people?
It gets worse. It gets funnier.
Please put your cameras away.
I'm sorry, we're on a public area, so we are allowed as press.
You guys, I would like you guys to turn your cameras off.
You're not on my camera.
Well, I'm on a camera. I would like your cameras to be off, and then I'm happy to talk to you guys.
Well, if you're the press secretary of the Secretary of the Department of Transportation,
just write her answers
down. Be able to ask questions from the American public that you serve?
Absolutely. I would like to do it without the camera on.
Take the questions, write them down.
A little bit aggressive.
That's a little bit aggressive.
Why is it aggressive?
It's aggressive. So now she introduces the woke language, right? It's aggressive to be filming me. Aggressive. Watch this. An unlikely hero emerges here. A very, very unlikely source of wisdom.
I'm on behalf of the American people, I'm just asking why he has not been here until Donald Trump came.
She's asked several times for them to turn the cameras off, and they will not do it.
She's been able to walk away. Would you like to go inside?
Look at that. How about a hand for the police? Did we ever think we'd say that? Look at the police officer laying down the law, getting it right here. Amazing.
People, I'm just asking why he has not been here until Donald Trump came.
She's asked several times for them to turn the cameras off, and they will not do it.
She's been able to walk away. Would you like to
She's able to walk away, exactly. The cop says they don't have to stop filming her. This is a public street. She's a public official. She wants to be a coward. She can walk away. How do you like that? The police
good
stepping in as the voice of reason. Good for her. Never thought we'd be giving it up for the police.
Yeah, and she's never getting promoted now because they're going to make a phone call to her captain for that.
Yeah.
Oh, she's getting fired for that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so now watch what happens. Look, this is hilarious.
Can I ask what the secretary is going to do with the picture of Jenny Kerr he took her the other day when she was asking?
So he's talking about the other day that we just played that video of him taking a picture of the Daily Caller lady. Watch this.
You guys are watching NBC. I'm happy to answer your questions. I would like you guys to not have your cameras on.
I had my camera up a minute ago. If I turn it off,
You all have your cameras on. I can see them. You guys, I'm happy to have this conversation.
All right, y'all. So we are with the press secretary for Pete
Now watch this.
Buttigieg, and right now we are being told
Not
that
appropriate.
we are not supposed to be filming. Again, we are here on behalf of the American public because we would like to have the conversation and we would like to ask the question as to why, again, it took almost 3 weeks for Pete Buttigieg to be here on the ground. To wait until Donald Trump came here to actually be here and speak to residents.
They're having a conference call to decide what to do.
Ask questions, and again, we're here on behalf of the American
They
public.
go into a huddle away from the camera
Ask these
while she
questions, but
talks.
for some reason, we're not allowed.
I'm watching the hand gestures.
Just hilarious.
Wow.
Absolutely hilarious.
That cannot make that up. I am not often shocked and stunned, but I am. I am
This
shocked
is
and
like the
stunned.
Bialystock and Bloom administration here. I mean, it is a comedy of errors. You hire a press
and then when
secretary
they-
who refuses to talk on camera? I never heard of that.
Right. How did she even get to that position with that kind of a lack of judgment? It's the
Because
it's
she was told
don't. Glenn Ross. I want to know whose fucking nephew you are.
Mhm. Wow.
How does she know? How did she get that job if she's that functionally stupid?
They told her not to give the soundbite. They told her not to say anything that would make Pete sound dumb. So therefore, she didn't
Well,
have
that's a
much of
short
an
list.
option. That's
Right.
right. You either shut up and you'd be like, I don't want to be on camera. I'm sorry. I don't really feel comfortable with that. And it's kind of funny coming from a guy who doesn't want to be on camera. By the way, let me explain. I'm in a sales position. I don't want to piss off any of my customers. I don't want to piss off an employer. And that's the reason why I do that, why I'm behind an avatar, on top of the fact that I want to put my focus on the content creators and on all the independents in this space, because I'm just an aggregator, really, and a producer in the back end. I come out, I do shows here and there, but I really want to put the focus on the independent journalists and writers and content creators like you guys that do this every day, really.
Well, thank you. Were some people asking about that in the chat while you're not on camera? I didn't notice that.
That's so something.
Okay. But the thing that's also amazing about this is that she volunteers to disclose herself as the press secretary. No one knows who she is. I don't think anybody even knows her name still. Like in all the reporting that I've seen of this, they just refer to her as Pete Buttigieg's press secretary. So nobody would have bothered her. They didn't have to be an issue. She could have just kept her mouth shut, let Pete walk into the room, and that would have been that. Instead, she volunteers. She raised her hand. I'm his press secretary. I'll take questions. So then they all go to her. And she says, but not on camera. Well, these are reporters, you moron. They're going to want to ask you on camera. They're not there for fun. They're there to do their job. Like, of course, they're going to want to record your answers. What do you think? They're just there to talk to you socially? I mean, just...
Pete's going to call that violence.
They're there to hang out.
I'm waiting for Pete. I'm just waiting for Pete to call that violence. It's going to happen.
Well,
we couldn't book that last-minute plane ticket to Palm Springs, so we figured we'd come to East Palestine and just could have chill, soak in the vibes here, you know?
Well, I mean, she's probably used to dealing with the access journalists in Washington who will, adhere to a request like that. You probably had some local reporters on the ground here who were not as open to being told by a press secretary that they can't ask the press secretary any questions.
Yeah, just extraordinary. Amazing. All right, we're going to go on to our second main segment, the anti-war rally. Does anybody have any last words on this before we do that? Going once.
One thing I will say.
Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Aaron Brockovich is all. Go ahead, Russell. Sorry, I keep stepping on.
It's hard because we
You go
can't
ahead,
see you,
then
so we
I'll
can't. We can't. That's the thing about having an avatar. We can't tell when you're
Right. No, so all I want to say was Aaron Brockovich is now in East Palestine also. She's an incredible water advocate, and she's going to bring a lot of light and a lot of corporate media also into this. So you're probably going to see some things happen. Hopefully, God, my heart goes out to the residents of East Palestine. I don't know. Look, this could happen anywhere. Freight trains run behind all of our houses through all of our towns.
Mhm.
And what would we do if the federal government basically gave us the finger and abandoned us? That's what happened in East Palestine. And that's the real story of what's happening here. And that's why Trump went to, and he was able to make these people look like idiots, because they, look, everybody knows, look, disasters happen, but the federal government shows up and they take care of your town and they bail you out and they do, they just basically gave these people the fucking finger, and it's really disgraceful.
Well, these were supposed to be the grown-ups, right? They were the ones who were gonna restore
the adults.
technocratic competence. They were the adults in the room.
That was the argument for Pete specifically. He's so smart. He's brilliant, right?
He's Mackenzie Pete, though.
He speaks bad Norwegian.
Outsourcing, cost-cutting Pete.
Appropriately enough, given that we're talking about Pete Buttigieg, this is a theory of how corporations collapse. It's called the Peter Principle. And the idea is that the incompetent hire the incompetent, and it winds up becoming a death spiral for the company.
Right.
That is what I think you're seeing here. Pete.
Well, if they hire the
not
competent,
be Pete should not be managing a game of jacks, much less the transportation department, and his choices and staff clearly reflect that.
Yeah. Tusker for $2. Stochastic terrorism. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Tusker.
What is it? Addy Ads is there. Jeremy Alfredo's there now, I think. They're doing some reporting over there, I think, too.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of people there. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's why we're covering this. You know, I went on Misty Winston's radio show. I talked about this at length with her. We just, sort of had a bit of a, not shop talk on the air, but I said, this is what indie media is for, right? Like, this is really why we do this. As much as it's fun to laugh at Ben Stein and rag on the Vanguard guys and comment on the beefs and stuff, like, if there is any efficacy to what we're doing, it's this. It's because nobody's going to get the word out about this stuff if we don't do it. And that was proven. Indie media and social media were on this. They were the ones who forced mainstream media to cover this. You didn't hear a peep about this in any mainstream outlet until the indie guys and just individuals on social media uploading photos and videos to Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. Absolutely very important. Your mother was a hamster.
It shamed them into covering it.
Exactly. Shamed them into covering it. Good God, y'all. What is Brandon good for? Absolutely
nothing. Say it
not
again.
necessarily nothing. He may be good for maybe good for war. Yeah.
He's good for $10 billion for Ukraine, according to
good for
today.
$10 billion. Right, exactly. Good for a few $1 billion worth of war funds. All right, let's do this one.
Where did I see if we want the government to take care of us, we need to change our name to Ukraine?
Yeah, exactly. They fly the Ukrainian flag,
or at least Israel and not Palestine.
Yeah, or East Israel, right? Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that was the other thing. You know what? I did want to make one more point about that East Palestine. How much of the algorithmic suppression do you think is happening on Facebook, on Google, and on Twitter because the word Palestine is in their name? Let's call it for what it is, guys. Yeah, you laugh, but I'm 100% serious. They're suppressing the shit out of these people, and it's gross, and it's really sad. They should lift all the filters off of the word Palestine just for this alone. I mean, it's crazy.
Listen, with some of the stuff that we research, like the segment that you're going to be dropping off for, yeah, man. I mean, the censorship is so clear. It's very difficult for me to research certain information because the algorithm suppresses it in the search.
Right. It's not that it's not out there. It's just when you have monopolistic search engines, it can be very difficult.
You got to go through 3 pages of results
to
find it, if at all.
Yeah.
All right.
We got one more super chat there, don't we? We got a 99-cent one.
Is that a super chat or a sticker? That's a super sticker from Baba Naga. Yeah, that's from earlier. That's from 847. But thank you once again. Okay. Appreciate all the donations, everybody. Thank you for your generosity and support.
Much.
All right. So 1 week ago today, actually, no, it's not 1 week ago today. It's 4 days ago today. I'm thinking it's Sunday's show. But 4 days ago, this last Sunday, the Rage Against the War Machine rally took place in Washington, D.C., and it got very, very little coverage, of course, from mainstream press outlets, as was predicted, of course. But we are going to play 2 clips, one from before the rally and one after the rally. So first, here is a clip from Fox News, Tucker Carlson, promoting the rally, plugging the rally on his channel, the #1 rated news and talk show in its time slot.
The anniversary of the war in Ukraine is coming up next week. The United States government under Joe Biden has been funding that war. It would have ended without the Biden administration. So a massive demonstration is planned on Sunday in Washington, D.C. It starts at 12:30 p.m. at the Lincoln Memorial. Probably haven't seen this on other channels. The message is very simple. It's nonviolent. It's reasonable. It's straightforward. Stop funding the war in Ukraine.
There you go. He went on to interview our mutual friend, Tara Reid, about the anti-war rally. The rally happened. And then after the rally, we saw a segment on the left-wing network, the liberal network, MSNBC. Here's Rachel Maddow off screen, but we can hear her voice commenting on the war rally here, the anti-war rally, I should say. Here she is giving her take on how that event went down.
Truly random rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A rally in support of Russia, I guess, given all the Russian flags. At least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there. There were some of the white supremacist groups you'd recognize from the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville a few years ago. Also represented prominently the remains of the bizarre Lyndon LaRouche cult.
The bizarre Lyndon LaRouche cult. The bizarre Lyndon LaRouche cult. First of all, let's hear it for the Lyndon LaRouche cult. Jose Vega made a speech there. Second of all, the balls on this woman.
Or we're doing Rachel Maddow's job for her by confronting politicians like an actual reporter should be doing.
I just want to say the balls on this woman to accuse anyone else of leading a cult when this woman, for 3 years straight, convinced her audience of sub-morons, highly unintelligent, brainwashed moron viewers, that Donald Trump was going to be frog marched out of the White House for collusion with the Russian state. And she continued doubling and tripling down on that after it was debunked, after the Mueller report was turned in. So how she could be accusing anyone else of being in a cult is just beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. But this is how fucking stupid her viewers are. And this is the main point that I want to make when we finish this clip here. But let's just let this play.
People with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. Also, at least one person who guest hosts for Tucker Carlson on the Fox News Channel was there as a featured speaker.
Yeah, like 4 former presidential candidates.
Vaccine
She's on
conspiracy
Fox
theorists,
News, all the buzzwords, Proud Boys, white supremacists, Fox
It
News.
was a really weird group.
Everything to set off the fear bell.
And a weird one. But
Weird.
that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose
Short
changes
straws
loose
and split
electrons.
ends.
That's advocating
Unlike your fucking
in this country,
imbecile
that
audience.
is in the right in this war, and America
Loose
should be on
electrons.
Putin's side
You know,
as he keeps invading other countries.
You know, loose electrons have quite a bit of energy. I don't know if any of you tried splitting a few, but
I'm not such a short straw, really. I take
I think
offense to
Einstein
that.
talked about it.
I'm not so short.
I have to play
E
this
equals
piece
something.
again here. I have to play this piece again.
Split ends and loose change and loose electrons. That's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America should be on Putin's side
Which is not what
as
they're
he keeps
advocating.
invading other countries.
That's not
As he
what
keeps
they're
invading
saying.
other countries. So far, he's only
to the
invaded
Americans
one.
who turned out as part of this small event this weekend, but it's not like they represent a big constituency that is arguing for this pro-Russia point of view.
All right, now look. The point that I want to make here, and the Libertarian Party of, I believe, North Carolina put out a tweet that I thought was spot on. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's essentially what my point was after I saw that. Her segment on that is exactly the segment you would have seen on Fox News circa 2002, 2003.
Yes.
Word for word. Just swap the
during
countries
the
out,
Iraq
obviously.
War,
But
absolutely.
everybody here is a Saddam sympathizer. They're terrorist sympathizers. They think, the Taliban has a rightful claim to Afghanistan. It literally, you could sub out the specifics. It would be the exact narrative. the exact narrative. And so all these
It also
liberals who
feels like-
remember the Bush supporters being as brainwashed as they were back then, they are that now. It is the same exact audience, just with a shoe on a different foot.
Oz LaFay from Roar Media on my show last night, filling in for Colin, brought a ton of historical context for this as well, with just the anti-war movement in general, talked about the Gulf of Tonkin and you know, us lying us into pretty much every war for the last like eon. But the fact that like no one asked like, there were veterans in the street, no one asked what they did in Vietnam. Or like, you know, but because of Tulsi's engagements and stuff, that's, you know, war criminal behavior. Or, you know, it's like I'm gonna show up for who's the quote? I show up for things I'm for, but with no one I'm against. I forget who said that. Someone will remind me.
Well, it's just crazy, and this kind of is going to come up again when we get into the Rowling thing. You know, you were talking about how they covered the 90s and how much the religious right were the people trying to ban things. It's just everything has just gone topsy-turvy, flipped around. I'm ready for Tucker Carlson to break out a guitar and start, how many times must the cannonballs fly? It's just,
how many times must the cannonballs fly? He'll say that in his voice. With how many times? How many times?
Hard rains are gonna fall
before they're forever banned. Why aren't they banned yet? They're not banned at this point.
That's a good question. But they're not going to tell you in Washington.
Right?
Yeah. We asked Joe Biden, but he didn't have an answer.
The answer, my friend, blowing in the wind.
Blowing in the
We'll be
wind.
back after this.
I would love to see Dylan doing the news, you know.
Exactly.
And here's right out of Ukraine with like.
It's like you consider yourself an heir to the tradition of the left, and you don't see the irony that you are the one mocking and denigrating the anti-war. Like, you know, the history of the right wing calling people unpatriotic for being anti-war. Like, you don't see, like, Rachel Maddow,
the Democrats would never.
She doesn't give a fuck. Like, she wants her money. She's on her money.
They're nice.
And that's all she.
So nice.
That's all she seems to care about.
No, it's amazing. I mean, MSNBC is beyond being the liberal network. They still are in some senses and on some segments, but they are the neocon network. They are now the neocon Republican network.
It's MSDHS. It's the Department of Homeland Security. They got Jay Johnson, and they got the head of the CIA. They got John Brennan. And they got the FBI guys. It's really the cops and the feds and literally the CIA and the intel infiltration of the corporate media. And it's really funny that you say this, because I got fired up. We've been talking since this rally. You know, again, what is the problem? And it's narratives like this that are being put out to the normies, to the main quote unquote mainstream. I even hate the word mainstream, because it's not mainstream. It's a narrative that's being sold by corporate networks that make billions of dollars off us. The mainstream people don't really accept this. They accept it because it's drilled into them and drummed into them day after day after day. And then it just becomes accepted thought. And this is what they figured out, you know. So my answer is got to unplug 100%, as much as you can unplug. And I wrote an article about that. We can talk about that later on.
Sure thing. Yeah, no, I will absolutely ask you about that.
Go
ahead, Russell.
Occupational hazard that we can't unplug because we cover this shit.
No, but he means get people tuned out of the corporate media. And this is the point that I want to make here, because we have talked to some people. I've talked to some people on different shows. We've had some people on from other shows. We're going to have people on from other shows in the future to sort of guest host while Russell is in India. And what I want to start talking to people about is this question of where do you go to recruit people into your cause? Because there are people who I very much like and respect who were overall in support of this Rage Against the War Machine rally, but who have said things to the tune of, well, there were some people there who are toxic to some people, right? And that shrunk the crowd. And the question that I have to ask for all these people is, First of all, who is toxic? But more importantly, the more important question here is, to whom are they toxic? Meaning, which audience of people are you worried about turning off, and which audience of people are you looking to turn on? As it relates to this segment here, whose audience at this point is more quote-unquote toxic to an anti-war movement? Tucker Carlson's or Rachel Maddow's? To me, it's not even a question. It's not even close.
Sure.
Because we are on the left, because we are sort of born of the Bernie movements, there is still a tendency among some people in our space, and I mean this with all due respect and love for them. That's why I want to engage them on this point, because they are reachable. I don't put these, they are not in the brainwashed lib camp. The problem is too many people in this space still feel like we can appeal to and convince the Maddow viewers to join us, and that's where they're wrong. That's where they're wrong. So what Indy, you said about they're not really mainstream, you're absolutely right. Tucker Carlson blows out Rachel Maddow in the ratings, right? Tucker's audience is way more relevant.
With Democrats.
With Democrats, even among Democrats. Tucker's
more
audience.
Democrats watch Tucker Carlson than any MSNBC host.
Exactly. So that speaks to what I'm saying perfectly. Tucker's audience is way more mainstream than Maddow's audience. So it doesn't make sense to what's mainstream and what's not. You have to pay attention, okay, who is reachable here? Anyone who absorbs that Maddow narrative that we just sat through is not reachable anymore. They are as far gone as the Bush supporters of 2003. That's what you have to understand. There's a reluctance to understand that because they are generally, quote unquote, left wing. But they're left wing in a truly meaningless sense on every major issue of the day, whether it's war and peace, whether it's freedom of the press, whether it's censorship online. They are on the wrong side. They are on the wrong side. And so you have to open your mind and think, okay, who is actually toxic? What do we actually mean by toxic? Do we mean someone's toxic if they offend the sensibilities of some fucking moron MSNBC addict? You can't think that way anymore. You just can't afford to. Times have changed. You have to get with it.
Well, it's more complicated in some ways, only because some of these people, not only from what they said, you have, there was this whole smear of Scott Ritter because he has taken a conviction and it was entrapment, whatever else people feel about it. He has to register as a sex offender, and that's an issue. There were other people on the stage, Tulsi Gabbard, who's completely flipped on parties. But I agree, there was nobody there. First of all, I'm never going to agree with every single person at an anti-war protest, nor should I have to, in order for all of us to come together and say, we want to fucking stop war. We need to stop funding Ukraine. We need to stop giving them $125 billion. And that does affect all of us. Now, one other thing, Keaton, I did want to contend, Tucker Carlson is also not mainstream because he's also being pushed. People aren't necessarily thinking he's pushing a narrative that then ends up in people's vernacular and in their speech on a daily basis. But that's also in service of a narrative. All of corporate media is pushing a narrative. And to me, none of it is really mainstream, because if you turned it off, nobody would be saying the things that these people are saying.
All right, well, fair enough. On a conceptual level, I will concede that, yes, everything mainstream is a function of certain narratives being put out there. So if you want to make that argument, I think it's a little abstract. But I think in the context of what we're talking about, yes, he owns the center. He, by virtue of the fact that he's the most popular, the most people watch him. The concentric circle around his show is the biggest.
But I would argue that part of why he occupies that position is not that he's creating these perceptions. He's picking up on them and reflecting them back. That's why he has an audience. I think what the things that Tucker is saying are much closer to what people already think. That's why he occupies the position he does.
What about the globalists and the New World Order? Sorry, what?
Hey man.
Alex, where did you get it?
Check
Rogan the same way.
Check out Davos.
Yeah.
Check out Davos.
Bohemian Grove.
All right, so guys, thank you so much for joining. We're going to let you go before we get you in trouble with our next segment here. But before you guys leave, plug your stuff. Indy, talk about that article that you just put out. I think it was great, and so I'm with you on that. 100% obviously, and it was great talking to you guys. So yeah, get those plugs in before we sign you off.
Yeah, appreciate it. We got our Substack at indiemedia.today. You can go there and check that out. All the links are at indieleft.media. That's where all my links are. And then, of course, for the network, it's indienews.network. That's where all the network links are. We do How Do We Miss That? Reef and I do a show on Sunday nights at 10 Eastern. That's called How Do We Miss That? Got a couple other shows that pop up on my channel here and there. I also have a tech tips channel where I teach people how to do Substacks and how to do other stuff, and that's exclusively on Rumble. Indies Tech Tips. Look that up. And then we've got Reef's doing INN News every Wednesday night on indienews.network.
Yep.
Alrighty. Thank you, Indy.
So-
Reef, go ahead.
He did most of mine. Indie News Network on Wednesdays. You can find us on Twitter at Indie Left News, on Twitter at Reef Breland. You can follow Indie News. What is it? At Get Indie News on Twitter for our Twitter.
The network,
but all the links are at indienews.network. You can find us there. So,
All right. Well,
Thanks, guys.
Indie News and Reef Breland, guys, it was a pleasure. It's always great to talk
Same.
to you. You guys are a lot of fun, and you're super quick. And so thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate
No problem. Anytime.
Appreciate the invite. See you guys soon.
You got
Bye,
it.
everybody.
Thanks,
You
guys.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
All righty. Wonderful. All right. So we have one last segment of the evening, and we have a guest who's going to join us from Australia for this one. She is a Patreon supporter and has call-in access to the show, and she tweeted at us that she wanted to join for this segment because she's somewhat of an expert on this topic, or so she claims. So should we admit Taya to this conversation right now, Russell? I think we can have her join for the whole thing, it sounds like.
All right, come on in, Taya.
Let's do this.
Hi,
Taya
guys.
Smith, what's going on? How are you?
Good. You need some female energy for this.
Yeah, we need some female energy for this, for sure.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
mean,
Russell's...
Keaton is too spirited.
What part of Australia are you from?
I'm in Western Australia, so Perth.
Perth, okay. Beautiful.
Yes,
Excellent.
yes, the fun part.
And you have a YouTube show of your own, don't you?
Oh, it's a dabbling thing. It's not something.
A dabbling thing. Oh, that's okay.
I'm wired for. But yes, no, it's good. Actually, a big part of what I jumped in with this stuff on YouTube was over the turf wars, over the gender wars that like back in 2016, where I started to see this sort of gain momentum over time. So it's something that a beast I've followed for many, many years, and I'm very tired. So
good. You're not going to yell at us?
No. I knew
No. It's actually just an interesting anomaly.
Yeah, no, I think Russell was a little nervous about this, but
why is that?
A little bit.
Well, you'll find out. But
You'll
no,
be fine. I meet people where they're at. It's fine.
No, and I've seen some of the
so-
tweets that you've put out about this recently, and so I knew you'd be a great guest for this segment. That's why I encouraged you to call in, because you were saying how you weren't sure you wanted to. Here you go, Chris Bishop. I'm going to get canceled just for watching this. No, we'll be fine. Listen, we're going to be fine. I don't give a shit. People
You're
can
fine.
fuck off.
Hey, Keaton, did you see the video clip I sent you? Because I would love to play that clip as part of this segment.
You mean the YouTube short?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I said, I only saw what I only have what I showed you before the segment. But if you drop it in the private chat, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I can figure out a way to get it up here. But I do want to talk about this. Russell, do you want to quarterback this? So first, we want to talk about, so there's a few issues that sort of collided when it comes to this whole J.K. Rowling witch hunt podcast that's out on thefreepress.com right now. The first 2 episodes in the series were just came out, I believe, 2 days ago. I listened to both of them. But this sort of issue gained momentum over the course of the past couple of weeks when GLAAD published a letter basically chastising the New York Times for its coverage of transgender issues. And so let's just read briefly from this first to give everybody some background. GLAAD writes, "It is appalling that the Times would dedicate so many resources and pages to platforming the voices of extremist anti-LGBTQ activists who have built their careers on denigrating and dehumanizing LGBTQ people, especially transgender people. While there have been a few fair stories, mostly human interest stories, those articles are not getting front page placement or sent to app users via push notification like the irresponsible pieces are. The LGBTQ community and our allies have had enough, and we demand the New York Times take action," and they gave essentially a 3-step instruction letter on what they're
Yes.
supposed to do. Stop, listen, and hire, which is a great technique when you go to a job interview. That's what you should just say. Just
Yeah.
cut off the manager. Stop.
Okay, I have 3 points.
Right, exactly. Stop.
That I need you to adhere
Listen,
to.
and then, of course, the most important, hire, right? Exactly. Stop printing biased anti-trans stories. Stop the anti-trans narratives immediately. Stop platforming anti-trans activists. Stop presenting anti-trans extremists as average Americans without an agenda. Stop questioning trans people's right to exist and access medical care. Stop questioning best practice medical care. Stop questioning science that is settled in big capital letters.
Yeah, which it is not.
We
Which
will
it is
do
not.
all we can to make sure that Times readers and editors have the necessary information and access to experts to report responsibly on trans people and issues, but we will be strongly recommending that trans youth and their families skip interviews with the Times in order to keep them out of harm's way. Timing on this to be implemented
immediately. We want this done immediately.
right now, starting right now. Step 2. Listen, so many trans people are wary of the Times and do not trust the Times. Hold a meeting with transgender community members and leaders and listen throughout that meeting. We get that timing. Hold this meeting within 2 months, according to their instructions there. And finally, number 3, this is kind of a self-explanatory portion. Hire. Genuinely invest in hiring trans writers and editors full-time on your staff. We know many trans writers and editors do not trust the Times. We don't trust you either, so we don't blame them. But do the work. Stop, listen, and hire. If you stop the egregious irresponsible coverage and listen to trans people, you will start to rebuild credibility and trust. Timing, hire at least 2 trans people in the opinion side and at least 2 trans people on the news side within 3 months. And Russell, that was apparently signed by some of the Times writers themselves, correct?
No. They sent out
I'm sorry. I got the
separate
confused.
letter.
That was the guild. Yeah.
Yeah, they sent a separate letter in support of this letter. Now, firstly, the Times' coverage, it's not really surprising that GLAAD decided to send a letter like this to the Times. I find myself in the very, 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 very rare position of having good things to say about the Times. The Times actually put out the first really major mainstream article debunking what trans activists have been trying to push about puberty blockers, that they're perfectly harmless and perfectly safe. They are not. They are not. I was very surprised to see the Times, which is this, they're usually right there with whatever the elite liberal consensus is on pretty much every issue, to go ahead and drop an article like that. So it's not surprising that eventually they got around to doing what they always do, to try to stifle debate, to try to stop people from having a discussion. You don't have to agree with the Times' articles, so you debate it. You don't come in, and that's what's so offensive to me about these tactics. You don't come in and tell them that they cannot do this reporting. So then the Times writers jumped on board and wrote their own similar thing with language that'll be familiar to anyone who has witnessed these kinds of campaigns. It's all the language of, it's a lot of emotional blackmail. It's doing harm. It's creating an unsafe environment. It's all of this. So we have a slide from that, right?
Well, I have the slide from Joe and Kathy. These are editors at the Times that were responding to that, correct?
Yes. Okay. So it was like 1,000 contributors from the Times basically wrote a similar letter to the GLAAD letter, with an emphasis on the Times, by doing this reporting, creating an unsafe work environment, on it kind of constituting harassment of trans employees and LGBTQ employees. So now, not only, and we'll get into the Rowling thing later, what the Times' response, I am honestly shocked. It never would I have expected them to scream, "Go get your fucking shine box," the way that they did. They turned around the next day and published an op-ed very articulately and forcefully defending J.K. Rowling from her detractors. And then they wrote an article responding to them and explaining to them that there's a difference between being an activist and being a journalist, and they're on the wrong side of that by writing that kind of a letter.
Yeah, they say it is not unusual for outside groups to critique our coverage or to rally supporters to seek to influence our journalism. In this case, however, members of our staff and contributors to the Times joined that effort. Their protest letter included direct attacks on several of our colleagues, singling them out by name. Participation in such a campaign is against the letter and spirit of our ethics policy. Sorry, the font's very small on that. We do not welcome and will not tolerate participation by Times journalists in protests organized by advocacy groups or attacks on colleagues on social media and other public forums. We live in an era when journalists regularly come under fire for doing solid and essential work. We are committed to protecting and supporting them. Their work distinguishes this institution and makes us proud. That is signed Joe Kahn and Kathleen Kingsbury, who were obviously executive editors and op-ed editors of the newspaper. And so, yeah, I mean, look, they took a stand for the craft, right? Basically, they put the craft of journalism above the sort of opinions / agendas of some of the people involved.
Well, I think you're seeing this more and more in many different spheres. They're starting to realize it's like a vampire, you have to invite them in. People are starting to realize what they invited in by bringing these people into their institutions and how destructive they are to those institutions once they get inside, and how no matter what you do, it's never enough. And they're not really pushing justice. They're pushing a personal agenda that has very little to do overall with justice, and that indeed has absolutely no respect for some of the most cherished institutions in our civilization, such as freedom of speech and freedom of the press. They care not a whit for that. Now, the Times in the past has indulged these people in many different areas. This is what's very interesting to me, that they took this stand now. It seems like somebody at some level, the publisher or something, saw where this is going and finally said, enough. If we don't draw a line somewhere, these people are going to end up dictating to us every single article and its angle. We just can't have this. We have to stop it somewhere. So the Times writers who had signed that letter got a little nervous because the Times' response definitely tacitly threatened their jobs, saying that it's really not within the code of conduct of the Times for them to take a side with activists like that. So they write back a letter that basically frames it as, well, no, because within our contract, we can address issues of workplace harassment. And then the leader of the union guild wrote something to that effect, arguing that it is not a violation of their contract to write a letter like this because it's a question of having a hostile work environment. Now, this really tells you that this movement is starting to lose its power, and more people are willing to stand against it, because Times reporters, who I would not consider the bravest bunch of folks, turned around and wrote their own letter, including the senior Washington correspondent for the Times, telling them that this is not a road that we want to go down, and it's not appropriate to frame editorial decisions as questions of creating a hostile work environment. So that slide I know we have.
In a response to Tuesday's letter from dozens of Times journalists, the Guild said in a statement to Vanity Fair, the Guild is committed to representing every member equally and fairly, regardless of reporting assignment. We take no position on the subject matter of editorial coverage and fight hard for every member's right to work in a healthy and safe environment, free of harassment and discrimination. These are principles that are at the core of trade unionism and are central to our mission. And we have another piece from this here. It continued, it would be a violation of federal law for the New York Times to threaten, restrain, or coerce employees from engaging in such activity. The journalists we represent at the New York Times and across all of our union newsrooms understand the difficulty of navigating such rights to speak on different issues and are aware that protecting those rights often includes defending members expressing a variety of viewpoints. It is our collective role to ensure that members are protected when they raise concerns at work. And then there is a response to that I have to grab, actually.
Yeah, that's the union letter.
Yeah, that's the union letter. Yeah. And then there's a response to that I have to grab. That's on my screen here. I have to find that, actually, because that was screenshotted. There was a lot of materials here that I had to pull. I'll actually
I'm
pull
back.
It. What's that?
I'm back. God bless him. I always dump 8 million materials on Keaton. You know, a lot of times we get accused, you know, those of us who are critical of the press, we often get accused of, you know, thinking that there's some kind of cabal that gets together with black robes and decides what's going to be in the news. And that's not it at all. This demonstrates, look, the people who work, particularly at a place like the New York Times, don't see themselves as people who don't believe in journalistic standards. They don't see themselves as biased. That's because they are so up the ass of their own elite class privilege that even when they're slanting things in a way that's extremely favorable to the narratives of society's elites, from whose number they are usually drawn, they think they're reporting objectively. It's not that they actually don't believe in it. It's that they don't realize that they don't achieve it.
So what they said was, I have it here. It's not going to cooperate with me for an image, but I have it read here. This is the letter that they wrote back. Factual, accurate journalism that is written, edited, and published in accordance with the Times standards does not create a hostile workplace. Every day, partisan actors seek to influence, attack, or discredit our work. We accept that. But what we don't accept is what the Guild appears to be endorsing, a workplace in which any opinion or disagreement about Times coverage can be recast as a matter of, quote, workplace conditions. That was how they worded that.
Right. So, look, they believe in the principles of journalistic integrity. I think it's just that they don't realize how far short of that they generally fall. I've never believed that they get together in a room and say, well, let's slant this way. It's not like that. So in that sense, I mean, this really illustrates that, yeah, I mean, it's not that they don't believe in these journalistic standards. It's just that they so often don't live up to them that when they do something like this, it's kind of shocking. I would never, I told you offline, I keep thinking of the Simpsons episode where Bart says, somebody had to say it, I just can't believe it was him. That's what I keep thinking of. Like, somebody needed to stand up to these yahoos. I can't believe it was the New York Times. I'm a betting man. I would have lost that bet. If you would ask me what is going to be the first journalistic institution that is going to wake up to the fact that if you let these activists into your newsrooms, they're going to end up eating you alive, I would never have guessed the Times.
Taya, do you have anything to add to this before we get into the Rowling stuff? Because that's next.
Yeah, a lot of what happened with this stuff with the media, because this has been like somewhat, there's been a cone of silence around this stuff for years, okay? And I think a lot of it is, the conclusion that I came to was a lot of it is just incomplete data, right? Which is that people were operating on like, this is how I sort of fell into this. I was like, an issue I hadn't really thought about. And then it was presented to me and I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I think a lot of people who go into this vastly underestimate the toxicity around it. They think it's just a normal kind of disagreement. They kind of go in, and then they see others who just sort of accidentally stumble into it, like a few people did, and they sort of drift right. First of all, they either drift right because there's no one to catch any lefties that are confused, or they just sort of shut up and they go, oh, too much, too hard, and then the conversations sort of happen back in the background, and then you've got all these bots and astroturfing and all that stuff online. But a lot of that stuff has been, from a journalism point of view, is that researchers, journalists, they all rely on Twitter data. They all rely on, insights. So this is where it comes back to things like censorship, which is where the data was messy. The data was dirty. This is what my mission was to go, hey, you guys are relying on bad data to make these marketing decisions, content decisions, what you're running, what you're not. This is why it's really important to make sure that we, first of all, deal with astroturfing and also allow for freedom of speech on social media, because the way that these things are used in research, social research, journalism, it's just a failure. It's actually just a failure of process around data and how, running, you get what I'm saying? Like, I think looking at it a different way is that this was a blind spot. I did an FOI request with our national broadcaster 3 years ago, because there was an article that was run here where we've got standards around the word woman, right? You have to, like their style guide says, you've got to refer to women in this way. And there was an article here. Can I just actually, before I start talking about this, lest there be people in the comments who go turf, 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 I'm actually like church and state here. Like I'm actually like neutral to an extent, got sort of sucked into it. But I also acknowledge that trans people do get harassed a lot on Twitter. They do get harassed online. I've observed some pretty horrible behavior on, I acknowledge all that stuff. So I'm not sitting here gaslighting and saying that doesn't happen, because it really does. Now, especially since the right have gotten involved. But I did an FOI request with the ABC here, and they ran an article that called women uterus havers, or uterus havers. They called us uterus havers back, and I thought, okay, well, let's use democracy to my advantage, and I did an FOI request, and I said, I want to see what led to that decision. I want to see the PowerPoint. I want to see the data, and the data that they relied on was an online survey around attitudes to LGBT issues. That was the data they were using that justified them breaking the style guide, that justified them, the kind of, again, it's just how these things can be exploited and gamed to get what I'm saying. So it's a lot of different things at once.
Well, sure, but a lot of that is caused by, and we'll get into this more with Rowling. And this is the point the Times is making. These people are activists. They're activists, and they're not interested necessarily in the truth or evidence. They're interested in pushing an agenda, and whatever they need to do to push that agenda is what they're going to do. So you're not dealing with honest actors. You're not dealing with people who are basing their methods and their claims on objective evidence. I mentioned before that, for some of the things that we research, it's very hard to research. One thing I pulled up for this is something they never talk about. I was actually debating this with somebody yesterday. I said, well, if all of this treatment, we're talking about medicalizing trans treatment for under 18s. So, well, if this is all, harmless, then why did Sweden ban it? Would you consider that a right-wing country, Sweden? Or would you consider Finland? Is Finland a right-wing country? Why did they shut down Tavistock? Why?
What happened there? Is there a head?
Well, there's a lot of and if you look at what their board of scientists released in Sweden, they said very clearly the evidence is not compelling that the benefits of doing this outweigh the risks and the harm. And the particular emotional blackmail they like to go to is that you're saving these children from suicide. There is no good evidence that suicide is prevalent in the trans community, period. There is no good evidence. And how could there be? Because we've only started doing this very recently. That long term, you actually decrease suicidality with early transition. There is no evidence for that. It is an enormous medical experiment being carried out on a generation of children. And in my opinion, a lot of people who are talking very loudly in support of these ideas now are going to be deleting a lot of their social media comments later, because when the tide turns, people who supported this are going to have to hide under a blanket.
And that's been happening for some time, which is people are sort of scurrying.
I
in the UK,
think,
particularly, you're seeing
yeah,
celebrities and people like that have been scrambling. You know, there was
Jamila
Jamil deleted all references to mermaids, for example, like a year ago. She was on the mermaids train and then suddenly very quietly deleting all of her tweets. And, you know, so that's happening. But we got to, first of all, sorry, I'm not going to take over the conversation, but we have to acknowledge the difference between UK politics and US politics as well, which is that the UK has a much stronger materialist, socialist, radical, you know, like feminist, Marxist feminist tradition that is that grassroots stuff that you're seeing in the UK. That's like, you know, quite scary swarm of women and that sort of, they're very different culturally. Right. And so that's why that, you know, there's been a lot of, I think sitting in Australia, I see all of this stuff sort of play out where we're in the middle. We're sort of in the crossfire all the time culturally. We kind of see those, like the differences between UK and US a bit more. But a lot of this stuff has come from grassroots action in the UK for many, many years that where, and again, I'm not, there's so many different problems here and so many different reasons for this problem, but it really does sit as where lots of different problems have collided all at once. Does that make sense? This is something that it's a new issue. It's a new, you know, that affects rights, democracy, all the types of things we went through with the printing press. We're going through with the internet, and the gender war sort of sits there because there's just lots of different things. But it takes 10 years to get to the high courts on these decisions. I think people underestimate how long the process takes for a lot of these types of questions around, you know, something so fundamental like sex versus gender. Like that's something that's still working its way through the courts, right? So
no, that's okay. Let me just set up the Rowling stuff now, just so I have a honestly, so I have a clear endpoint for the segment, for the clickable segment. No, that's okay. No problem. No, it's no problem at all. It's no problem at all.
I could write more books than J.K. Rowling.
No,
Harry
look,
Potter
we will have, we will continue this conversation 100%. So
you know, predictably, you have some people getting upset in the chat. I want to make clear we're talking specifically, and with Rowling, we'll get into the issues of trans people in women's spaces, but specifically, we're talking here about medical transition of children.
All right, well, let me talk about this now. Then, before we bring Rowling in, like we have her online, like we have her in the waiting room.
Do we have JK?
Stay tuned for our exclusive interview with JK Rowling. No,
I'm standing in.
When it comes to medical transitions for children, look, I'm a parent of twin boys. My cousin is a very famous trans influencer to the extent that they are famous. Her name is Plastic Martyr. She has a huge following. Paparazzi follow her around Los Angeles. It's not my scene, so you know I don't know how famous she is within that scene, but she's fairly big. You know, she knew from when she was 4 or 5 that she was a girl. She was born a male, and she knew from 4 or 5. And she said, you know, being able to transition really saved my life because it was this really troubling identity crisis that I was going through. And so I'm very fortunate that I was able to transition when I did. Now, I don't think she formally transitioned until she was over 18. I think she was in her mid-20s at the time, if my memory serves me right. Again, second cousin lives 3,000 miles away. I don't see her very often. But I believe I have the details of that more or less right. When it comes to that question of, you know, transitioning minors, I really feel like this is an issue where, and there are many, many issues where I think this is very, very important, where the promotion of family values, strong family units, is not an impediment. It should not be seen as a threat to liberals or a threat to the left. It's actually a prerequisite to a lot of left and liberal social policy. Because me personally, as a father of very young twin boys, if one of my guys was feeling like they were born in the wrong body at 14 or 15, and this were really troubling them and really bothering them, and they wanted to transition, right? I wouldn't necessarily want the state to tell them, no, you can't, but I would want a part of that decision because they're under 18 and I am their legal guardian, right? I am responsible for them. So I would want to be able to really talk that out and make sure that this is the right thing for them. And because this is such a new field, there is going to be randomness of outcomes, right? You can't, from a policy standpoint, attack this so that there are not certain winners and losers, right? Because let's say you ban transitions for minors. Well, if you ban transitions for all minors, whether or not they have consent of the parents or not, and I do think that consent of their guardian should be required in that case, then you're, of course, going to hurt some people like my cousin who perhaps feel like they need to transition and will be fine with that choice for the rest of their life. You might, if you ban it for minors, end up protecting some people who are going to regret that decision down the road. And if you allow it for minors, you're going to have the same problem, this sort of inverse version of that, right? And so, to me, the only way to minimize the randomness of those outcomes, the only way to maximize good outcomes and minimize bad outcomes is to empower individuals and families to make these decisions as best they can for themselves. It's the only way, because otherwise you are going to have, like I said, people wronged by whatever policy you put in place. Now, of course, you're going to have some people wronged by requiring parental consent, because there are going to be kids who are either estranged from their parents or kids who feel one way very strongly and their parents are just dead set against it, right? So you're of course going to have people who are negatively affected by any sort of policy decision you make here. But to me, the only way to diminish that is to promote strong families. And I think one of the ways in which the left digs its own grave on this is a lot of their messaging, a lot of their signaling suggests that they actually want, what is the meme? This is the world liberals want, right? And it's a tattooed woman who's had 7 abortions, right? Exactly, like that's the meme, but there's a reason why that's a meme, because the left does signal that to a large extent. Chelsea Handler just put out that video bragging about how she's a single childless woman, right? I wake up, I eat an edible, I masturbate, I take a nap, I get up, I do yoga, I start texting guys that I want to hook up with later, right? There is a celebration of that lifestyle, which I think people perceive as an affront to a traditional family values lifestyle. And the value of a strong family is that you empower individuals and families to make these decisions as best they can, which is all you can do in a situation like this. All you can do is the best you can. There is no way to safeguard every person from a negative outcome here.
Okay, so this is what I would say. I mean, I agree up to a point, but not really. Look, there are a lot of fucking nutty parents out there. I don't necessarily trust it to just be left to the parents. Not when you're talking about something so severe. That's why I really wish we had loaded in that video, because I think a lot of people have not seen these detransitioners. They have not seen them talk about what they've gone through. They have not seen them. The video I sent was of a 16-year-old girl who they put on testosterone at 11, now talking about how she mourns that she's kind of been permanently androgenized. You know, she's got male pattern baldness at 16. She's got the depth of the voice is never going to go away. So, you know, the emphasis is always thrown onto, well, what happens if you don't do this? Well, what happens if you do and you're wrong?
Yeah.
Look at these people. And we don't look at those people. And I advise anybody who thinks this is about transphobia or hating trans, it's not about that. It's about feeling that we do not have enough evidence to risk doing that to people. because in the end, later on, as an adult, you can make your choice, right? But if you do this to somebody before they're really mature enough to make that kind of a decision, in many respects, that is irreversible. And that is not something, especially with the evidence that we do have, which of 9 studies that have been done on this, the range is 60 to 90%. The gender dysphoria where the person is not transitioned resolves into they turn out to be gay. Because look, if you're a little kid and you're attracted to the same sex and you've gotten the idea from the world around you that that means that you're the opposite sex of what you are, that is going to be very confusing for you. You might think if you're a boy attracted to boys that you must be a girl. It doesn't really necessarily mean that you're trans. And are some of them? Yes, I'm sure. But based on the best evidence we have, it's not even the majority. So if you're going to start doing this to all of them, and think about the life that you are dooming them to. You are dooming them to a life of medicalization. You are dooming them to a life of dependence on the medical industry. And if you're talking about bottom surgery, you're talking about a surgery that has about a 60% complication rate. So that is, you know, it's ridiculous the way they make it like, oh, well, you just transitioned. No. And there
Well, no,
are
that's
a lot
not
of,
the page that I'm on. That's obviously not the page.
no, I know.
But I'm just saying,
I didn't
I'm
mean
very
that.
hesitant of saying the state should intervene to stop something from happening, especially if it is the decision of a parent and their child. I mean, you know, it's a tough thing because look,
I think until
18
we have
is an
better
arbitrary number
information,
too. Is there no
under
random
18,
that?
You don't do it.
Okay, so if you're 18,
Under
I mean,
18, you don't do it.
Well, then you're right. Okay, I'd be interested to hear that. But if I could just make this very, very quick point, the 18 number is an arbitrary number, also, right? I mean, let's not act like 18 is not a random number that determines adulthood. I mean, come on, do you trust a 19-year-old with that decision more than a 17-year-old? Not really. So there's arbitrariness to that as well.
That's a point. But look, man, if we're going to let people sign up to the military at 18, we're going to let people, you know, be considered in law legal adults at 18, then you have to allow them to make those decisions as well. And at that
Right, but
point,
that's a technical question.
If you made a mistake, it's your decision. Look, you're not a 13-year-old who it's incredible to me to see activists make the claim children know who they are. What the fuck are you talking about? What planet are you living on?
Yeah.
Were you a child? What makes you think that? Do you remember being a child? Do you think you knew who you were?
I would say in most cases that's true, but not in every case. And this is
different people over the course of my life.
I would say in most cases you're probably right, but in some cases they are sure. And in what capacity should the state intervene in that matter? I mean, I think the best solution to this is to promote and incentivize and empower families to be open and loving and accepting and trusting of each other to the point where they can make these decisions. And of course, there's going to be times when it goes wrong. There's going to be times when it goes wrong no matter what path you choose here. There is no path here that results in 100% good outcomes. That's unfortunate. But I think that, to me, the way to minimize the randomness of the outcomes, which is a way to hopefully ensure more positive outcomes more of the time, is to promote the nuclear family. And that is something that the left is very afraid. But that's something that the left is afraid to do. I mean, that is something that gets lost in the messaging.
In a society this dysfunctional, we cannot wait for the soul of the American family to be restored. And part of my skepticism is, I mean, have you seen any of these cases of lib parents who have multiple trans kids? It's a condition that rare, and all the kids wind up trans. Like, what do you think's going on?
Again,
no, this is what I'm saying. I don't trust the parents with that. We don't trust parents to remove a limb. So why would you trust parents with that?
All right, we kind of steamrolled Taya by accident there. She said there was a middle ground. Go ahead, Taya.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, there is. When you're talking about the involvement of the state, it's not whether the state intervenes with the family or the or not. You know what I mean? Like that, you've got medical professionals, so a lot of this is left up to clinical judgment, right? So, what in an ideal situation, what you'd want is, I've had like several like different. Not gender reassignment surgery, but different other surgeries that are elective. But, you go through a process where, you go see a psychologist, you see someone, if you're having a major surgery, you see all of these things. There's checks and balances in the system. And the problem is for-profit healthcare, first of all. If you've seen some of the pharmaceutical companies in particular, the annual reports is really telling, where the way that, and again, this is just something where it warrants pause. It's not anti or for or this or that. It's lots and lots of different things, and it depends which slice you slice off, which, like what my position is. But if you look at them referring to this as the emerging market of gender dysphoria that they're expecting to explode.
Well, that's another thing.
And that's, again, that is something that the state can regulate and have extremely harsh criminal penalties for, with malpractice and, making sure that those processes, having a zero tolerance approach. I mean, again, because we're in a federal system too, you've got those problems of, state, local, lots and lots of different things there. But it's up to clinical judgment, right? At the end of the day, with family and the doctor and psychologists to sort of have those protocols, right?
Well, we have the added complicating factor in America of the profit motive, right?
Precisely.
Where this is medicine is a huge industry here. That's not to say doctors don't make money everywhere else in the world, but this is a money machine here. So there's that incentive that's out there.
Thank you for subsidizing our medications, by the way. We very much appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
Yes, you're welcome for that. We have video of a doctor at a conference at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee talking about how much money there is to be made in these surgeries and how there are clinics that support the entire clinic just by doing bottom surgeries, particularly in the American context, where, look, there are different, even if you want to get into middle grounds, there are different protocols. There's the Dutch protocol, which has much stricter standards for transitioning, but the American way of approaching this, where as soon as somebody identifies as something, the protocol is to affirm them in it rather than to send them for treatment. Well, you're immediately putting them on that path, right? You're not considering any other alternatives because that's conversion therapy, right? To consider,
and particularly girls on the spectrum, which is a big cohort. Right?
You have all of these comorbidities, autism. Yes, I just want to answer this from Derek here. Is that coming up on the screen? It's slow for me.
Yeah, I see it.
Russell doesn't have any friends who were runaways or had absent parents. He probably had a mom who stayed at home. Imagine thinking there aren't 16-year-olds on their own making it happen. Actually, I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with my single mother living on disability and welfare. And I had many friends who fit that description, and they were all pretty fucked up. Thanks for playing. Go on.
All right, let's get into the Rowling stuff, shall we? It's good because now that we hashed that out, I feel like we can sort of crystallize this conversation about J.K. Rowling and make it just more about her than any of this, which is actually probably for the best. All right, so by the way, folks, if this is your first time here, please like the stream and subscribe to the channel. We got a nice little crowd here, tapering off a little bit because it's getting late, but that's okay. Still got a decent crowd in here, so thank you guys all very much for that. All right, so the Free Press has just put out a podcast series called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, obviously author of the famous Harry Potter books, the immortal Harry Potter books. And they have released the first 2 episodes. They are going to continue rolling out episodes over the next few weeks or so. And I listened to both of the episodes. I think so far it is quite good and quite worth everyone's time. If you want to go to thefreepress.com, I think it's thefp.com, and listen to those podcasts. But of course, just to give some background as to what exactly the controversy is around J.K. Rowling and her stance on trans issues, we're just going to take this just as very sort of crash course, if you will, here. So there was an article that came out, Creating a More Equal Post-COVID World for People Who Menstruate. And J.K. Rowling, this was in 2020, quoted, people who menstruate, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumbin, wimpen, womid. She, of course, was referring to women. And then she followed that up with, if sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. The idea that women like me who have been empathetic to trans people, for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is a nonsense. I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. All right. Now, what she's referring to, and this, they get into detail about this in the first couple episodes of the podcast. She was a battered wife who fled her husband and raised her first child on her own, on welfare, and became this author of unprecedented success and fame. And so in that sense, being a woman, being a female, really did inform her life's path, right? I mean, if that history weren't as it is, there'd be no Harry Potter. I mean, which means the world we live in would be much different. So that's what she means there by saying being female really informed who I was, because she channeled a lot of the grief in her life from losing her mother and obviously being on the run from a violent husband into those books. And that's one of the reasons why they resonate with so many people. Not really with me. I don't really dig them myself, but anyway, that's for everybody. Everybody can love them if they want. No intention of interfering there.
I like them.
You like them? Russell's a Harry Potter fan? All right. My wife's a huge Harry Potter fan, and several of my friends are. I'm just not a real fantasy fan. But anyway,
I'm not
that's...
like a fan. I'm not like running around to conventions with a wizard hat on, but I like the books.
He likes the books. All right, fair enough. So anyway, that's what she means by that. And, that initial tweet thread clearly did not display a hatred or resentment of trans people. It is just an expression that, of course it means something to be a biological cisgendered woman. This is not only mainstream, this is foundational to most people's understanding of feminism, right? That is what it meant to be a feminist until apparently June 7th, 2020, when she even, sounded off.
There's actually backstory to a lot of this stuff too, so.
Yeah, no, sure. I will toss to you, actually. I'll toss to you right now because that was a break.
So the context. The context of that is that tweet thread was actually not the first time, right? So a lot of it was when she first defended Maya Fosteda with her case. And, there's this whole lead up sort of following Magdalene Burns, who's, now deceased. So there's, so there's sort of those rumblings for about, I think a year or two before she actually came out with that thread. And so there was a lot of speculation and drama around her beliefs. Like, again, just like policing stuff, it's so silly. But I think the context has to count, which is that Maya Fosteda was actually going through her tribunal at the time, and it was J.K. Rowling's support of Maya that was actually, I think, the major cause of people being upset, not necessarily what she said. Again, I've tried to reverse engineer this stuff to try and understand, because what we're seeing with J.K. Rowling is also the big old double down that happens when someone enters this debate and they suddenly just, you know what I mean? Like that, she sort of felt that need to advocate and double down. And she hasn't necessarily said anything wrong, but there's a whole context to this and history with the whole dynamic of this. It's just messy. And it's just like, there's nothing on face value that she says that is incorrect, but there's other sort of, again, it's not just freedom of speech, but also freedom of association that is at threat here. It's more the fact that she was sort of hanging out with certain people who were challenging, who are slightly more extreme in their views. So
yeah, she was a coddler, as they would say.
Yeah, a coddler, exactly. Yeah. Yes. So I just wanted to be fair in the interest of fairness, lest the chat get upset and assume that I'm, in one tribe or another. I just wanted to be fair and say that.
Some
No,
people
let
also.
him.
All right.
Fuck 'em.
So hang
I'm
on.
kidding.
Before we.
No, they're actually taking it very well so far. I'm very,
Yeah. I'm
So,
trying to
but,
come in
I mean,
because people don't know who I am. So.
The ones that didn't already unsubscribe. So before we get deeper into the main meat of this, I just want to address this kind of side narrative with the Harry Potter thing. So this is from Karabmoth. The anti-Semitic thing is interesting. I understand that the bankers of the HP universe are similar to historic caricatures of Jewish people. It seems to me that it wasn't intended that way. Okay, so what I am going to say is, yes, as a Jewish person, I agree with you. I feel like if you feel that any time, characters are portrayed as being kind of money hungry as a group, you think of Jews, maybe you're anti-Semitic yourself. Maybe it's less that the portrayal is anti-Semitic than that you're anti-Semitic because you made that connection. Because I can tell you as a Jewish person, until people started saying that, it never even occurred to me watching Harry Potter that those were the Ferengi on Star Trek, are they space Jews? Like, like everybody who's kind of money grubbing is an anti-Semitic caricature. I'm not buying it.
But it's not a coincidence that one of the biggest, most full-on fandoms of the internet is associated with this, which is that the parasocial component, the fact that like coming out of Tumblr, there's a whole historical thing here, the intensity of the Harry Potter universe. You're going to certain people have been sort of radicalized into, for lack of a better word, into this sort of feel that they kind of go over analyze these things. The whole shipping and the fan fiction communities and all those things, they get very intense about these types of things, and that's going to result in like a massive upset when your hero, like that the research indicates that, but when you're upset by a hero or a celebrity, you take that as a personal attack on your identity as well, right? So it's not a coincidence that those two things are occurring at the same time.
I think that's going on, but I think another dimension of it, there's somebody with a YouTube channel who was both a Scientologist and trans, who their YouTube channel talks about how similar the experiences were because their tactics are very similar. Scientology has the principle laid down by L. Ron Hubbard, which they claim to have disowned, but there's reason to believe that's not true. Fair game. So if anybody is attacks Scientology or is an enemy of Scientology, you can do anything to them, right? You can lie, you can cheat, you can steal, you can just destroy their entire lives, you can frame them, whatever. Any way that you want to attack them, you can attack them. The activist community is very much the same way. They don't really care about what's true. Any fair reading of J.K. Rowling, she is clearly not transphobic. She has questions about preserving spaces for biological women that are exclusive to them.
She's one of them old-fashioned dick-hating feminists,
Yeah. And as somebody who has a history of being battered, that's part of what she argues, that a lot of women who have experienced that don't feel comfortable in those spaces having somebody with a male body, however you identify. And this is where the whole activist effort becomes so Orwellian. That's the reason they cannot allow conversation and debate. And that's what this is really about around Rowling. They need to take her down because she's opening up space for a discussion they don't want people to be able to have, because it's a discussion about 2 + 2 does not equal 5. You can identify as a woman. That doesn't make you a woman in a literal sense. It just doesn't, and it never will. You are never going to be a biological one who has had the experiences of a biological woman. There is a difference, as demonstrated by the trans New Jersey inmate that just impregnated 2 women with, quote from the authorities, her penis. You are never convincing most people that is a rational formulation. And Hogwarts Legacy was just released, and this kind of, to me, runs in parallel with what happened with the New York Times. Look, they pushed all this too far, and now the backlash is coming. They tried to shut down that game, and the sales are through the roof on that game. You have a lot of people playing that game who don't even game, just as a statement to basically, because where do you go to vote against this? Well, it gave them an opportunity to vote against it by purchasing that game. So really, that's the essence of it. They're trying to fair game Rowling. And that's also for the same reason Scientologists do it, so that everyone else is going to be scared. If they can take down a billionaire author, how can I speak?
Yeah. But let's not also remember that there are always, when we're talking about a franchise like Harry Potter, that as an asset is immensely valuable. Like if you look at some of the business movies, you know, like you go, okay, I'm not conspiratorial, but you can see where interests can all collide at once, not just pharmaceutical, but, you know, the media sort of creating this shitstorm of cancellations, but also the fact that this is a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar franchise that people, you know, want to try and decouple from her because she controls how it's used. She controls how it's licensed. And so I think, again, it's not the just asking questions thing, but it's also, I think we need to be very healthily skeptical about, you know, trying to pull her rights away. I mean, when you see these rumblings, this is where you go, is this a disinfo campaign, the most sophisticated disinfo campaign of all time? Because you start to see these patterns of language where they start to go, she no longer owns this thing, it's ours now. And that they sort of manufacture these little arguments in the community that then become law, like the stochastic terror. I track that one as well, where they start here, but they keep repeating. And eventually it enters the mainstream and there becomes an actual conversation about whether J.K. Rowling owns her IP. And I go, that's very, you know, and I go, it's not, it's an interesting thought to have, right?
If you didn't have a pattern with these activists doing this to everyone, I might think there was something to it. Yeah, I mean, you don't.
You sit there and you go,
this doesn't require a corporate conspiracy. This is
exactly. But interests.
This is what they do, and you know, this is one point I want to make when I look at a lot of this. You know, I remember when JFK Jr. died. And, you know, Gen X was so desperate to have its own JFK moment that you had these morons out there crying in front of the camera as if this had the significance of the death of JFK, talking about what he meant. He was a spoiled rich kid who took a plane up when more experienced pilots told him not to and got his poor wife killed. He was nobody to celebrate. You look at that and you look at the event that it was based on, and you say, wow, man, this country has really jumped the shark. So you look at a lot of these things and you look at their antecedents. You look at ACT UP. You look at the gay rights movement. You look at the civil rights movement. You look at Malcolm X. You look at JFK. You look at
televangelism.
And then you look at this now, and it's a pale shadow of what came before, and really it's a much inferior imitation of something that was much more profound and much better thought through and much less cynical in its tactics.
But that's because it's commodified. So I think that because I've come from the marketing, all I see is marketing funnels everywhere online. So I go, okay, you know, there's lots of different phenomena at once happening here that are somewhat detached from the issue. It doesn't matter what the issue is. There's a funnel that's nudging people in varying directions. When I'm not talking about conspiracies. I'm saying that these things are just bots nudging, mass reports, all these sorts of things, marketing firms, reputation management, all those sorts of things. It's actually more of a perfect storm. And that's why I say this stuff is just lots and lots of different individual issues that where interests align. Well, so the pharmaceutical business is interested in this happening.
Sure.
Media is interested in that. The activist is interested in building clout and getting patrons, and so it's lots of different, you know, in international relations. No allies, only interests, right?
Yeah, but there's also, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think there's a broader transcendent sort of dynamic at play also, which is a distorted perception of what the stakes actually are. And this is what the podcast sort of gets into in episode 2. It kind of brought me back in time to the late 90s and the early 2000s, where you really had a Christian fascist movement in power. George W. Bush won re-election.
Just to be
despite,
clear, this is the free press is running a podcast. This is the first sit-down interview she's ever given on this subject. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, so in the early 2000s, you had a Christian fascist movement in power. George W. Bush, despite starting the Iraq War, won re-election by having his campaign team bring up gay marriage as a ballot referendum in the state of Ohio. They won re-election despite destroying the whole fucking world based on ginning up anti-LGBT, or in this case, just I guess LGB sentiment, right? Yeah. In the heartland. You had people, these very same people had their eyes set on J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter franchise. You had preachers calling up and saying parents have a responsibility to protect their kids from Harry Potter, because if your kids read Harry Potter, they're going to go to hell and you're not going to see them ever again when you go to heaven. Right? I mean, this is the level of sickness, of sick, evil shit that you were talking about. Right. You had these people in power. They had every branch of government post 9/11. They were on a rampage here. You don't have that now in the same way. And I feel like a lot of the Gen Zers who act like J.K. Rowling is this symbol of theocratic fascism because she fired off a tweet that says, I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. If she is your vision of the theocratic fascist enemy, that is just born of a certain ignorance of very, very recent history. And a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds are ignorant of that history through not necessarily any fault of their own. They were, some of them, not even born when that was happening. There are some people my age who are not as tuned in to what was going on in the early 2000s. I was a politically conscious kid. They don't know that history, right? And so they don't have a sense of who the actual enemies are here, and they don't have a sense of the fact that these fascists, these theocrats who are actually out to control people, right? For those in the chat, no, Russell's not out to control people. You actually had 20 years ago in this country a movement of fanatical right-wing Christian lunatics who were out to control people in a very, very fundamental way in terms of burning Rowling's books, banning their books, banning gay marriage, right? These people were on the march, and she was in their crosshairs. So she has gotten it from both sides of this culture war. But I feel like in order to really view her with the level of vitriol that a lot of the activists view her now, you have to not really be aware or have a real sense of the danger posed by the very people who you now lump her in with, who were her sworn enemies not even 20 years ago we're talking about.
Right. Well, and this is why I'm always saying on the show, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, kid. This is why this world is so maddening for me. Because my entire life, those were the censors.
Right.
Those people.
They were literally burning books.
Fanatic, the Billy Grahams and the Tammy Faye Baker, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Those were the enemy. Those were the censors. Those were the ones who wanted to stifle speech. I can't even wrap my head around having to fight people over basic concepts of speech and open debate who, in essence, are left in terms of my values. I'm for trans rights, so it's not quite like it was fighting with the Christian right where, like, I was against everything that they believed in. But you have this group that, you know, the objectives I don't disagree with, but the angle they've taken on it and the approach and the tactics and the underlying philosophical take on what the basis of those rights are is extremely dangerous to a lot of the best ideas that our society holds. In fact, it's dangerous to the very ideas that have allowed this rights movement to get as far as it has. That's it. That's all I got.
I was seeing if Taylor had anything to add.
There's a lot to unpack there. That's a lot. But I think one of the premises that I think is, again, this is just a sort of US versus the rest of the world thing, because you've got the two parties. You've got your left party and you've got your right party. And under no meaningful definition are the Democrats or left wing in terms of like a global, you know what I mean? Like,
for sure, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I just want to, and I think that they're ultimately pro-capitalist. The elephant in the room is obviously class analysis, socialist analysis here, which is that capitalism is adaptive, and so eventually, like the words around corporate social responsibility and those things. There was a lot of one thing about that time was that there was a lot of upward pressure for corporations to get their shit together and be, corporate social responsibility was the buzzword in the 2000s, right? And so maybe because I was on the marketing branding side, I saw more of these things, but it's just content. They see this stuff as content.
Of course, yes. No,
and
well,
brand
that hasn't
positioning
changed
and
since the
PR.
early 2000s. No, not at all.
And yeah, exactly. So, and I think a lot of the activists see it as content. And a lot of this stuff is just in a system where people, especially young kids, they're super online. I've seen it with my own kids, super online. They only, exist within these little bubbles. They're looking to their leaders. Like the timing of Rowling's coming out, so to speak, on Twitter. Don't forget, it was in the middle of 2020 when these kids were at home. Their parents were probably fighting. There was a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of trauma and a lot of fear. Like one of my criticisms is of the timing, which is that parasocial, it's not necessarily a logical thing, it's emotional, which is with parasocial relationships and fandoms particularly, is that they were tremendously hurt and let down when in a situation where kids watched their leaders, they watched their parents, they watched, the government, they watched everyone just fuck up like everything and leave them go. And that's just as just generally.
Right.
And then you've got vulnerable kids who, think the answer to that, they find the only answer that they've got is a marketing funnel that tells them that they're trans and that's going to fix all their problems. I mean, this just seems like again, that's one slice of one thing, which is where I can be critical of Rowling and her timing and her not taking her platform, like with the gravity and time, those sorts of things. That's a valid criticism, I think. And but then there's the substance of what she said, and then there's the context of what she said. They're all very different things, and then you've got different types of trans and different types of this. It's just so many different things. And I think the problem with this debate is that everyone's lumping it into ones and zeros, for and against, with us or against us, funnily enough, that sort of stuff. And I think that that's one of the things where it's like, well, it should be up to the team who are at the mercy of regulation and very serious consequences if they fuck up. So that creates the disincentive to be, malpractice. And then obviously those other things, economic, fostering family stability, all those beautiful material things. And, ultimately leaders to get their shit together so that people aren't drawn in by celebrities as leaders. But, that's the bigger picture stuff.
Well,
anyway, that's just my little speech. Sorry about that.
The reason they were so disappointed by Rowling is because she's a very doctrinaire liberal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look. I don't buy that she conceived Dumbledore as gay. I think she retconned that for the fans to give the fans that representation, or LGBTQ audience, and fine. But this is part of what's crazy, and it goes back to the Glenn Greenwald thing. The left is a movement that seeks to make itself smaller. You got someone like Rowling who agrees with you on 99.9% of what you believe, who just, maybe thinks that people with penises shouldn't be in women's prisons and, transphobe!
If you've been on the left,
if you can't
I could
handle
tell you
that.
a time. I can tell you a time when the Green Party nearly split in half over pizza. That's just what the left does. This is why that whole leaving the left thing is silly too, because if you've been active in the left, you know that the perfect is always the enemy of the good, always. And the smaller the disagreement, the bigger the fight. Like that's generally like that's a thing about the left, right?
It's the life of Brian thing.
Yeah, it's always
People's Front of Judea. We're the Judean People's Front. White.
Yep, seriously, pizza nearly split a political party in two.
All right, let's take some super chats real quick.
Yeah.
Taya, thank you so much for joining. You're welcome to hang out. We're
No
going to play
worries.
Russell's India video in just a moment, but let's take some super chats here. Loving Taya on the show, doing great. Hope you've been having fun, Russell. See, you got a good review from our Poo and Wavy. No, I think people generally dug this segment here. I'm not just a uterus, high heels, and makeup. I also happen to have a brain. Yes, you do, Tusker. Life experiences and class experience that makes my true identity. Indeed. Thank you for sharing some $5 worth of your class experience with us. Appreciate it.
This just boosted us a little closer to the middle class.
We got a little more class experience, a little more class experience in our column. Imagine there was the same energy for hating Rowling on the left as there were for supporting rail strikers. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, this is the self-sabotaging nature of the left. Thank you, Mescalito.
Well, they would have sick days.
Right.
They would have sick days, and you wouldn't have two guys working a 3-mile train.
Exactly. A lot of first timers here in the chat. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't lose track of us. And thank you guys very much. Orcs remind me of black people. Different convo though. Yeah, I'm not. I don't know what is an orc.
All right. So I'll break that down really fast. Okay,
very fast, please.
All right. So hey, I gotta go have breakfast.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's getting late for you already. Yeah.
Okay. So Lord of the Rings is, yes, if you sit down and you read the book, it's not as clear in the movies. Yeah, man, if you look at the geography of Middle Earth, this isn't a galaxy far, far away. It's supposed to be our Earth in an earlier incarnation. Yeah, it's got a pretty racist perspective. Like the orcs are dark-skinned and they live in the south, and then there's like a race of men that are not quite as evolved as the men of the West. They're kind of like hairy and short and squat, and they live more in the southern regions, and they're more ape-like. Like, yes, the geography of Lord of the Rings is like if Hitler wrote fantasy. I mean, it really is. The men of the West are clearly the German, British, and then there's these Italians and Greeks, and yeah, that's what he's referencing.
Yeah. All right. Mescalito, another $10. Thank you, Mescalito. Upper middle class and above live in a very different world from the rest of the country. The media echoes their issues. The rest of the country resents those issues and them. Yeah, no, I think that is certainly true. Although Harry Potter, I mean, that was a true phenomenon. I remember, I don't think it was the last book. It may have been the last book, though. This shows you how much I know about the franchise. But I was actually doing a video project in the deep, dirty South, a small town called Houston, Mississippi, which is like cartoon stereotype of a dirty South town. Like literally guys chewing on grass, selling watermelons out of the back of the pickup truck at the town square. And we were in that town the night before the new Harry Potter book came out. And this was a die-hard conservative Christian town. And there were kids in costume waiting outside the Walmart to pick up the book. You know what I mean? It's just, that kind of phenomenon that just caught on in places where you would never expect. I mean, the appeal was that broad, which is why, even though, to your point, in the super chat here, yes, I mean, I think these issues are generally sort of siloed off along class lines. This particular issue and this particular author was just such a force on the world stage that it just hit a nerve with everyone everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Is that everything we got? Do we got anybody else? Any other super chats? I think we're all caught up.
I mean, this isn't a super chat, but I'm going to geek out for a second. Yeah, you're right, Tusker. It does come out a little bit in the movies, because they're fighting with the turbans and the elephants at the end. It is there a little bit. It's just not as clear as it is in the books, though.
So I liked the Fellowship of the Ring. I liked the first Lord of the Ring movie, and then the second one I didn't like as much. I just found it visually to be more drab and kind of boring. But that's the single worst experience in a movie theater I ever had, was watching the Lord of the Rings Two Towers movie, because it came out when I was in high school, and we had a group of friends that we would all go to the movies with. And so we all went to see the first one. I thought the first one was good. And then the second one I didn't like. But there was one friend in our circle of friends there who hadn't gone to see the movie yet, who couldn't come that day, right? He was stuck doing something else. So then we all decide, okay, we'll go back and see it all again, only he can come this time. And I was not a fan of that decision because I really didn't like the movie, and it's 3 fucking hours long. But my girlfriend was part of the circle of friends, so when your girlfriend's going, you can't bail, right? I mean, you have to go if she's going, right? So I said, okay, fine, we'll see it again. We get to the movie theater. The guy's not there. He doesn't show up. He shows up late, right? Like 5 minutes after the showtime already starts. And it's a huge hit movie. So he's late. The guy who we made a point to see this a second time for is late. And by the time we get into the theater, of course, it's a huge movie, so the place is packed. We have to sit in the second row from the screen. So I'm like this the whole time, neck killing me, watching a lousy movie for the second time for 3 hours like this. It was the most miserable movie-going experience of my life. Horrible. So,
my favorite movie is Office Space because it's an hour and 15 minutes long.
Yeah, I tend to like short movies now too. Yeah. I'm very sensitive. I'm very triggered by like over 210. I'm like, nah, I can't.
That's why we didn't review Gandhi while I'm here. Like,
right? Yeah, make your point.
And you wouldn't watch RRR either.
No, it was like over 3 hours. Yeah, no, I don't have time. I have twin 4-year-olds. I got 3 hours. Take me a week to get through a 3-hour movie now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway. By the way, Film Club tomorrow. Justin is coming back. We're reviewing the new movie called Armageddon Time, the sort of coming of age drama that's set during the election of 1980. That was a pretty good movie. I like that one. So we're going to be reviewing that tomorrow. Anyway, Russell, do you want to play? We'll play a preview of your India footage. You want to set this up so you know what we're playing. First of all, I got to set this up because I made fun of Russell. I didn't make fun of him, but I gave him.
Did you include my Ukraine clip? Because that was like my favorite.
Well, no, that's going to come in the piece at the end. You know, that's going to come in your edited piece because it was too short. I wanted to get through the big hits. So I gave Russell a hard time about being attacked by a snake while he's sleeping in the desert. And turns out the most deadly snake in India just happens to be called the Russell's viper. And so, yeah, no joke. And so he asked his tour guide about that. That's one of the clips we have. And then another clip is of you riding on the train with the door open. Then we also have the clip of the Bob Marley fan out in the desert there. And then we have the clip on the temple. Do you want to talk about that before we play it?
Okay.
These are all in a row. We're going to play them all in a row. It's about 4 minutes.
So I climbed up this insane flight of stairs up to this temple on a mountaintop. And you get up there and the monkeys are up there with like the stray dogs. There are stray dogs everywhere in India, but everyone's so nice to them that they're not dangerous because they're not at all threatened by people because nobody's ever been mean to these dogs, which I think says a lot about the culture. Look, man, not to break up the meeting, I've said this to people, like, look, man, if you just had dogs running around like this in America, some like serial killer in training would get a hold of these dogs. There's no way. This
it's definitely different.
We have too many psychos in America for this to happen. But yeah, man, you got the dogs and the monkeys hanging out up there. And, you know, the monkeys are like the mafia, man. You know, if they smell food in your bag, you pay or you die, man. Those monkeys will fucking throw your ass right back down there. You know? So I caught this whole, and then the dogs want in on it, and the monkeys obviously can go places dogs can't go.
Yeah, the dogs got no chance.
And they just like to fuck with the dogs. You know, monkeys are smart enough to get pleasure out of just fucking with these dogs. So I got all of that on film. It was pretty funny.
All right, let's give this a watch. This is only a few minutes, but it's pretty fun.
Hello, dissidents. What I like when you get outside of America is you have a concept called assumed risk. So, for example, in America, they would never just kind of leave the doors hanging open on a speeding train and leave it up to you whether you want to just hang out and take the risk. But in India, you can do this, right? Right. All right, so this is a good time. So somebody suggested that because my name is Russell, I need to be afraid of the Russell Viper.
Jackasses, all of them.
So why is that? Why do I not need to fear the Russell Viper?
Because snakes are in hibernation at the moment. It's winters.
Yeah, sure.
And they come out only during the summers, which is from May onwards, right up to August.
So if I die, it won't be from the Russell's Viper.
Yeah, it'll probably be from Russell. What's your name? Collins.
It'll be from your big
My
mouth.
camel's name is Johnny
Your tour
Walker.
group is gonna get you.
Hopefully he's not a drunk.
That's for Tom Stratton, by the way. I hope Tom is watching because Tom thought I got the wrong continent. He thought there were no camels in India. I said, no, I got the right continent.
Oh no, man! This is the desert, man. The Thar Desert. It's a big one
Yeah.
on the northwest side.
Yep. All right, here we go.
This okay?
Yeah.
All right, let me hear Buffalo Soldier.
Buffalo soldier. Buffalo soldier. Bad luck to India. Rajasthan to bye.
There are a lot of Bob Marley fans in this town?
Yeah.
Yeah?
You know Jingo.
Good morning.
Jingle bell, jingle all the way. How much fun a restaurant.
So are these just like, were those villagers? Did those guys just live out there, or were they out there with the group? Or?
Those are the camel herders. Those are the guys who took us out with the camels, and then they just stay there for the whole night, tending the camels. And then I was the first one up, and so they were just around the campfire making chai. And I went over to hang out with them, and the guy started singing Buffalo Soldier. What? And in this version, Buffalo Soldier is from India, if you know.
From India, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Jingle bell, jingle all the way. You know?
All right, here come the monkeys.
These are the rare vampire monkeys of India. If you don't give them food,
That's
they
great.
drink your blood.
I love monkeys. Monkeys are so cool. I would get a pet monkey if my wife would allow me to. I think my kids
I
would
had
love
to
a
give
pet
him his
monkey.
food, man. It's like the mafia up there. You got to pay or you die. They throw you back down the mountain.
Just jumps in, just
Yeah,
fly
give these
around.
monkeys an offering. If the dog's trying to get in on it, monkey's like, yeah, I don't think so. I got 5 of my guys here. I see one of you. Oh, what? You brought in your friend, huh? Fuck you. I'll come back with 7 more monkeys.
That's great. I love how the one jumps off of the ledge there. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, try that. Try to come out here.
Now look how he jumps back.
Huh? Now what are you going to do? Now what are you going to do?
Look at this jump. Look at that. Look at the strength it takes to do that.
Look at me.
I would never go to work if I
Later,
had this.
dogs.
Yeah, no. Poor dogs. They're like, damn. Got nothing.
They're like, maybe we could get the other ones.
Yeah.
And here we are at the top of a mountain in Pushkar. And we see a very common confrontation in the wildlands.
You're
between
David
the
Attenborough.
dogs and the monkeys.
Right, so that's a sneak preview of Russell's India trip, and like I said, we're going to put together a full edit when he gets back. But there you have it. All right, are we done for the
Very
evening?
interesting. I think we are, man. That was man. We did an almost 4-hour show. This show was as long as Gandhi.
Yeah, right. You could have watched Gandhi. Exactly.
watched
Yeah, no, that was a long one. That was a long one. Anyway, Taya, it was great to meet you. Thank
Thanks,
you for
guys.
joining. We appreciate
Cheers.
it very
Get rid
much.
of me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Taya Smith. Thank you to Taya. Thank you to Reef, Breland, and Indie News. Seems like forever ago they were on the air. They made the right decision checking out when they had the chance. They would have been in for more than they
Oh,
bargained.
come on. One good turn deserves another, man. We were on their show for like 3 hours.
Yeah, we were on their show for 3 hours, actually. They did a longer stream when we were on their show. We actually had to tap out because it was too late. That was when we were doing the midterm coverage. That's when we were like, there was a period during the midterms where those 3 days, the day before, the day of, and the day after, I spent more time on the air than I spent sleeping. We literally live streamed for more than I slept. I think we were on the air for like 16 hours over the course of 3 days, and got almost no sleep.
I was busting it out from Buffalo.
Yeah, that's right. All right, guys. All right, well, where are you headed to now? You got to take a bus somewhere?
Okay, so I'm going to a place called Abanari that has a step well intact that goes back to about 900 AD. We're going to be there for 1 day. Then we go to Agra to see the star of the show, Taj Mahal.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm going to Varanasi, which is the most holy city in India, and then back to Delhi. And then I'm going to do a flight away from this tour on my own to Goa before I come back.
All right. Excellent. Robin, thank you for the $2. Appreciate that. Thank you guys very much for sticking around. This was a fun show. We got a lot covered here, as we knew we would. Russell's got a journey through the day, and I must be going to sleep now because we are a world apart. But thank you guys very much. Thank you for all the donations. Really much appreciated. Thank you guys very much for sticking with us over the course of this pretty epic 3-hour program here, but we had a great deal of fun. Thank you once again to Taya, Reef, and Indy for joining us. We will see you guys on Sunday, once again, live, 7 Eastern. And Justin and I, my friend Justin, will be joining me again for the Film Club tomorrow, where we will be reviewing the new period coming-of-age drama, Armageddon Time. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support. Be safe, be well. Russell, you want to grant them a namaste for the road?
Namaste and courage.
Namaste and courage. Good night. Good luck. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the Film Club at 9 p.m. That's a premiere. That's not live. That's pre-recorded, but we will be back here live Sunday. Thanks again, everybody. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you next time.
Please clap.